Hello everyone. I'm glad to see you on my channel. The story I'm going to tell you today is pure. It is true that all the bad things that happen in life happen for a reason. It is said that we can appreciate the good things, the things when they happen to us. I hope you enjoy this story. I wish you a pleasant viewing experience.
The wedding cortege was speeding through the city. The driver turned on the incendiary music and honked nonstop. The bride was in anticipation. She was constantly adjusting her veil and fiddling with her bridal bouquet. She was enchanting. Light makeup, blonde curls arranged in a beautiful hairstyle. The veil gave her a mysterious style. A happy smile shone on her face. Emily's heart was ready to jump out of her chest. She couldn't believe that very soon she would be the wife of the most beloved man in the world, her Ryan. Let his parents be unhappy. Let no one believe in their sincere love. Let them say she's having an affair with a rich guy for the sake of a wealthy life and a capital city residency. She doesn't care about gossip. People were just jealous of the kind of love she had with Ryan. It didn't happen very often. The motorcade whizzed past the main registry office and soon pulled out of town. Emily didn't understand and turned to the driver. "Excuse me, but what's going on? Where are you taking me? I'm so confused." "The signing's at noon. Ryan's waiting for me there, so turn around immediately." If this is a joke, it's a very bad one. But the driver's response was cryptic. "It's a surprise. You guys relax. It's a long drive. Better listen to some music." Emily panicked. She started pulling the handles, the doors, but they were locked. She begged the car to stop, but it wouldn't stop. The driver drove over the bumps like a madman and tried not to look in the mirror at how the bride was nervous and began to cry. It was unpleasant for him, but he could not do otherwise. An hour later, the car stopped in the middle of nowhere. The driver turned off the music and muttered, "Get out. We're here." Emily didn't understand a thing. On the edge of an abandoned village, almost on the very marsh, stood a ruined cabin. Stumps everywhere, the scenery ominous. The girl became frightened. "Tell me, are you crazy? Why did you bring me here? I'm going to call Ryan and tell him everything. He's going to have a field day with you. You ruined our wedding. What is this swamp? Take me back." The guys had it. "Don't yell at me. Actually, it was your failed mother-in-law, Barbara, who ordered you to be taken here instead of the registry office and dumped." "Well, you can ask her." Emily was crying and couldn't believe what was happening. "No, it's not true. It can't be. Ryan couldn't. He loves me. I'm going to call him right now," she kept saying. She frantically dialed her fiancé mother-in-law's numbers, but they were blocked. Then the driver got a message. He read it and handed the phone to Emily. "Here, read it if you don't believe me. I work for Barbara and I can't disobey her. She'll fire me in a heartbeat." The girl read the scary lines. "You've already taken the toad to the swamp where it belongs. Hurry back. There's more work to do." It finally dawned on Emily that it wasn't a silly prank, but the terrible truth. Ryan's mother had decided to mock her, to teach her a lesson, to make her realize that she didn't belong in their family, that she should go back to wherever she came from. So Ryan knew everything, but did nothing to protect Emily from embarrassment. The girl got out of the car, tears filling her eyes, and she stomped out of the car, not knowing what to do next. The driver took pity. "I don't be afraid. Sit here, and I'll come back for you. I just have to report to Barbara first. I'm sorry. It's not my fault. But you know, maybe it's for the best. The missus wouldn't have let you live in peace anyway. Here's your jacket." Emily tore off her veil, sat down on the stump, and wept bitterly. She couldn't get her head around the shame of it all. She couldn't believe that the man who had sworn his love yesterday had betrayed her today. She'd wanted to surprise Ryan at the wedding by telling him she was pregnant. Imagine how happy he'd be, how he'd twirl her around and kiss her. But now what? How to lift a baby by herself? She replayed all the stages of her relationship with Ryan in her head and couldn't understand at what point he decided to be so mean to her. Emily had grown up in the country. Her father worked as a tractor driver, her mother at the post office. They kept a farm and a vegetable garden, just like everyone else. From the outside, their family was considered exemplary. Rarely happens in the city when a man in the house does not drink. Everyone worked like bees. The house was always tidy. The townspeople envied Emily's mother, Natalia. They said that she was lucky to get married. But few guessed what was really going on in their family. The head of the family, John, was not only strict, stern in character. Everyone was in line. No one dared say a word against him. Whenever Mother sat down to rest for a while, my father would say, "Why are we so relaxed? Go to the barn, check the feed for the calves. Give them some hay. There's so much to do. And you're sitting there like a madam." Mom would pick up right away and go to work in silence. The same was true of Emily reading books, wasting time in the club, going to the disco, generally obscenities. Father also controlled marks at school and grumbled if he saw bad ones. Dad was very stingy with affection. He never hugged or cuddled her. He kept telling Emily, "When you graduate from high school, we'll match you up with Jason. I've already talked to his parents. You'll work on their farm. He's a good guy, he's good at farming, he's not lazy. So I've already arranged your future." Emily tried to resist. "Daddy, I want to study. I don't like Jason at all. He's redheaded and cocky. I want to go to the city and get an education and work there." My father became angry and pounded his fist on the table. "Why do you want to contradict your father? What the hell are you thinking? Who is waiting for you in the city? Your mother spoiled you. You read a lot of nonsense. This conversation is over. I've made up my mind. If I hear about the city again, I'll lock you up so you'll think twice. It's a woman's job to keep house and have children. Do you understand?" Emily was crying, asking her mother to intervene. Natalia shook her head. "What are you doing, daughter? You know what kind of temper your father has, don't you? He won't even listen to me. Don't be so upset. Daddy only wants what's best for you. Maybe it's okay to get married. You'll live with Jason." Emily was a stubborn girl, and she was determined to run away, to go to the city and make her own way. It seemed awful to marry someone she didn't love and live her whole life like her parents. So she did. She worked on the farm, saved up some money, packed a bag for the road. Then her father saw her. He yelled, tried to lock her up, but Emily broke free and took off. And that's when Daddy shouted in anger, "Oh, that's it. Go on then. Just so you know, there are no princes there. If you come back, I'll never let you go home. You're a fool, my daughter. You'll regret it." So Emily found herself in the capital. Right from the train station, she went to college. Since childhood, she dreamed of becoming a dressmaker. The girl got in without difficulty. She was given a room in a dormitory. It was hard, of course. But girlfriends helped her out, shared everything. Emily's parents were very offended. Other relatives came to the others, carried bags of groceries, supported them, but never to her. That's the kind of temper my dad had. He stopped communicating with her, went on principle. Mom would have come, of course. A couple of times she, through acquaintances, still passed Emily a transfer. But it's clear that the father did not allow her to visit her daughter. He said she disobeyed and let her do her own thing. After graduation, Emily got a job in a small atelier, rented a modest apartment on the outskirts. In the evenings, she read women's novels about love and sighed. Imagine that too will meet a prince and will love her for her ability to sew perfectly. It was a great help to Emily not having money for beautiful clothes. She sewed them herself. So the girl always looked fashionable and interesting. She and Ryan met by chance. Just like in the movies. The guy stood in front of her in the checkout line at the supermarket and dropped his wallet. Emily immediately picked it up and, without thinking, jumped out into the street. The guy was already getting into his car. She held out the wallet. "Ugh, I could barely catch up. Here, you lost it. Take it." The young man was taken aback and began to thank her. "But look at that. It's true. Thank you very much. I'm sure not everyone would have done that. I'm pleasantly surprised. My name's Ryan and you are. Why don't we just call me Ryan?" That's how we met. Ryan offered to drink coffee, gave Emily some brownies. They got to talking. Turns out his parents own a travel agency. The guy visited many places abroad, enthusiastically talked about what he saw, and the girl listened with bated breath. She fell in love with Ryan at first sight. He even looked like the prince of her dreams, just as confident, smiling. He smelled of masculinity. The affair between them was very passionate. Ryan took her to exhibitions, concerts at the museum, and movies. He opened for Emily another big city, patiently taught her how to behave in society, the rules of etiquette. She absorbed everything like a sponge. Their feelings were mutual. The flowers knew it. The groom whispered such tender words of love to her. He gave her gifts. Everything was going just fine, until Ryan's parents found out about their affair. Barbara was furious. She tried her best to dissuade her son from getting married, to convince him that he could have nothing in common with the girl from the village. A couple of times even appeared in the atelier, and without shyness, embarrassed Emily. The woman was sure that she was spinning Ryan, wanted to register in their luxury apartment and live at their expense. It was impossible to prove to her otherwise. And then one day there was a scandal. Ryan had spent the first night at Emily's house. In the morning they were awakened by a knock on the door. A furious Barbara flew in like a fury and shouted, "You shameless bitch. You've already jumped into bed. Cover yourself up. Standing there in your shirt. Where's my son?" The girl got angry. "I'm actually at home. I wear what I want, and don't yell at me. And you don't have to yell at me. Ryan and I love each other, and we're still going to be together." Like it or not, Emily hoped Ryan would stand up for her too, but all he did was get dressed in a hurry. And Barbara kept yelling, "Son, have you forgotten what bedbugs are in here? What have you gotten yourself into? You go home right now and forget about this place, and know this wedding is not happening. Your father and I didn't raise you to marry that dressmaker. Ryan tried to smooth things over. Mom, why are you so upset? How did you even find me? Don't yell. Calm down, wait. I'll be right down outside, Emily said with tears in her eyes. That's it. So you think this kind of behavior from your mother is normal? I mean, she humiliated me, insulted me, and you don't say a word. So maybe you really don't need me. She was choking with tears, as if a bowl of slop had been poured on her head. The groom began to embrace her tenderly and whispered, "What are you, my dear? I don't take it so personally. Yes, Mom is a complicated person. It's hard for her to accept that I want to get married. She's just jealous, you know. Don't worry, she's always like that. And then she'll cool down, calm down. I'll talk to her. We'll definitely get married. I love you, I promise. Don't you believe me?" And Emily immediately forgave and believed. Breaking up with Ryan was beyond her. She believed it would work out, but a mother couldn't ruin her son's life. Although, thinking back to her dad, she realized that it could happen. Emily didn't realize she was pregnant right away. Just one day at lunchtime, her partner brought in some fried fish. Emily smelled it, and she was sick to her stomach. Then she bought a test, and everything became clear. The wedding was a week away, and the girl decided that she would present the news right at the ceremony. She really wanted this baby, because he is from her favorite man, Desired. The girl already imagined how they will walk with a stroller, raise a baby together. After all, this is how it should be. A real strong family. And now what? She sobs on a stump. All artificial Ishlia mosquitoes and gnats, frozen, and there's darkness ahead. No wedding, no groom, nothing. When the driver came back for the poor bride, she was completely insane. Her eyes were swollen with tears. Her forehead was burning. The fever must have risen. Emily was shaking. She could barely utter her address, and everything went black in her eyes. She lost consciousness. The girl woke up from the bright light hitting her eyes. She was lying in her bed covered up to her neck with a blanket, a damp towel on her head, and her friend Lillian leaning next to her. Seeing that Emily had regained consciousness, she exhaled. "Well, thank goodness you're awake. Good, I got a call from the guy who brought you in yesterday. He found the number in your phone." Emily was so scared. "You had a high fever. I wanted to call an ambulance. But Oleg told me everything. How you'd been dumped by that bastard Ryan. He and I thought it was just nerves. Found some antipyretics in the medicine cabinet. I had to give you a shot. Then you fell asleep. You slept for 24 hours. I even listened to you breathe, but you really scared me, Emily." The girl remembered everything, and a lump came to her throat again. She'd never cried at anyone before. She was suddenly so angry. What should she do now? She should make an appointment for an abortion before it's too late. How can you and your kid barely make enough money to pay the rent and eat? That asshole Ryan, but we'll find you a better fiancé. You'll see. Emily frowned and shook her head negatively. "I'm not going anywhere. I'm not going to kill the baby. I already love him somehow, don't you see? I won't be able to live like nothing after this. It's okay. I'll survive on my own and raise the baby. And I don't need nobody. Thank you, Lillian, for taking care of me. I was so sick. I don't remember anything at all." Her friend shook her head. "Look, why don't you just go home? You said your family isn't poor. Your parents will help, and you'll feel better." Emily frowned again and replied sharply, "No way. That's what my father told me. If I brought it to the doorstep in Houston, he wouldn't let me in. You don't know him. There's no way he'll forgive me. He's gonna piss my mom off too, saying she's a whore. Not like I'm gonna have to deal with it myself. You shouldn't have fooled around and listened to fairy tales about love. I thought I'd found a prince." It turned out just like in that fairy tale. Ivanishka drank from the hoof and became a goat. So Ryan turned out to be a goat. Well, that's fine with him. Let him live his life the way he wants. Well, it's time to get up. I have to go to work tomorrow. I've got to get some more food ready. I don't have time to write it out, Lillian marveled. "You're a tough cookie, girlfriend. I couldn't do that." "Well, I'll run along. You call me if you need anything." The day went on. Emily's soul was smooth and bad. She wanted to cry all the time. It seemed that everyone in the world knew about her shame and squinted. But the girl held on, did not allow herself to cry, and worked hard. She took orders at home, often stayed overtime, tried to earn at least a little dowry for the baby. But as luck would have it, my health in the second trimester began to fail. She had to go to the hospital twice, and the money she earned was spent on food and treatment. The situation was dire. She was about to give birth. The landlady threatened to evict her if she didn't pay. Emily drove to the hospital with a heavy heart. Black thoughts hovered, and the future seemed bleak. The labor was hard, but it was uneventful. A boy was born. Emily named him Sergei, pressed to her breast a native lump of happiness, and cried. She kissed the baby and realized that she would never give her miracle to anyone. A nurse came in to see her. Svetlana, I remember. In the next room, a woman was having a difficult labor, and then everyone was running around like that. Is she all right? She probably didn't survive twins. It was just a huge belly when they wheeled her in on the gurney. The nurse sighed. Unfortunately, the woman in labor died. She had blood problems. They couldn't stop the bleeding. This is the first time in our maternity hospital, and the babies, as luck would have it, are very allergic to formula. Breastfeeding is the only option. My poor grief-stricken husband is looking for a nurse, but it's not so easy, Emily, without hesitation, offered. I can feed the babies if you need me to. I'm in so much pain, there's so much milk. My breasts are hurting and tearing. What good is to be wasted? The nurse was happy and brought the babies. They were a boy and a girl. Emily began to feed them. They sucked greedily on the breast and were full. Then they immediately closed their eyes and fell asleep. The nurse began to thank them. Oh, thank you. It's so good. They were screaming so much, poor ones, they were hungry. They eat a little of the formula. Then they regurgitate everything. It was a disaster, Emily thought. What a grief in the family. Children without a mother, she complained about her life. A couple hours later, a haggard man came into her room, expensively dressed. Emily was well-to-do, but in her eyes she could see the fear of death. Ryan crouched beside her bed and spoke in a husky, low voice. Hello, Emily, my name is Ryan. This is my wife, Ashley. She died in childbirth. And the twins, Stephen and Alice, are also my children. I was told you had a lot of milk, and you fed them. You helped me so much. I'm still in shock about what happened. I can't recover. I have a funeral coming up and allergies. Even the expensive formula doesn't work. Help me, please. I'll pay any money. I need you to be a nanny and a nurturer for my babies. I know you have a son, too. It doesn't matter. Maybe you can live with us? I'll give you a comfortable room. Excellent food. Understand, I can't lose my children as well. I understand you have a family. Your husband will be against it. Let him live with us, too. It won't be for long. As soon as the children can be fed, I will not burden you. Emily was happy. This option solved all her problems with money and housing. She immediately agreed. I don't have a husband, so there are no obstacles. I agree. Don't worry, there is enough milk for everyone. After the discharge, Emily and her son moved into Ryan's huge mansion. There lived his parents, an elderly couple, Jeffrey and Laura, Ryan himself with his children, and his younger sister, Angela. Emily and her son were allocated a spacious room where they put cribs for the twins, so that it would be convenient for her to take care of them and feed them. At first, it was not easy for the girl to cope with 3 babies at once. She was spinning like a squirrel in a wheel, alternately feeding all 3. As soon as one calmed down, the other began to cry. It was a headache. The family had received the nurse coldly, telling Ryan that it would be better to hire an experienced older nanny because they didn't know what kind of woman she was or what to expect. But Ryan saw Emily's efforts, and after work he would take the babies from her and take care of them himself. He was very grateful to her for taking care of his children, who were gaining weight on her milk. He paid her correctly and bought everything she needed for her 3 children at once. Emily had a particularly difficult relationship with Ryan's sister, Angela. She behaved arrogantly, showed her discontent with the fact that the nurse sat at the common table, say, her place among the servants. Once Angela even decided to frame the nurse, making a scandal that she had lost an expensive ring from the box. And everyone in the house except Emily is all her own, she shouted. She must have stolen the ring. We should search her room. I'm sure that's where it will be found. Why did you bring her into our house? Is it hard to breastfeed children? And for that kind of money? Emily became upset at such accusations. You know, that's a bit much, she said. I didn't ask for it, I just decided to help the babies. But such rudeness and lies I'm not going to tolerate. Go find a replacement. What if I pack up and leave now that my services are no longer needed? Ryan was outraged and stood up in her defense. Are you out of your mind, Angela? How can you throw around accusations like that? Why are you attacking Emily? I'm sure she didn't take the ring, and I've known you since you were a kid. You're always dropping your jewelry. It's not the first time you've lost it. I'd better search your room now. Apologize to her immediately, and don't let me hear you talking to her like that again. You'd be better off babysitting your nephews instead of clubbing. Ryan quickly found the missing item under his sister's bed and made her apologize to Emily, but Angela harbored an even bigger grudge against the nurse. The thing is, Ryan's late wife Ashley was a close friend of Angela's. After her death, there was no way Angela could accept Emily into the family. She did not believe that she came to the house with good intentions and thought that Emily wanted to surround her brother and marry him. Angela herself was not good with babies. When she picked up Stephen, she'd scream. Alice would jump up and down. It's horrible. Emily's gotten so good with them. She was so good at it. Before a walk, like an experienced soldier, she quickly managed to dress them all one by one. And most importantly, she babbles something, smiles. My father tolerates it. He only grunts, and that was annoying too. How come children don't accept their own aunt? But they're drawn to someone else's girl. After this scandal, Angela quieted down, stopped bothering Emily, but she still looked at her unkindly. But one day, everything changed. Emily was out in the yard with the kids. They were napping in their stroller, and Angela decided to go swimming in the pool. The heat was unbearable. She stood on the edge of the board, stretched deliberately, showing this redneck, her slender figure, and a gorgeous swimsuit, and jumped into the water. But she didn't make the right call. Her leg twisted during the jump, and already in the water a cramp began to cramp her leg, and Angela started to panic and drown. She wasn't a very good swimmer. Emily saw it as she was in clothes, immediately jumped in to save her. She barely managed to pull Ryan's sister onto the grass. Emily rolled her over and started patting her back. Finally, Angela started coughing and spitting out water. She came to her senses and gasped for breath, and realizing what had happened, she suddenly looked at her nanny or mate in a completely different way. "Thank you, you saved my life. And I'm sorry for bugging you. I swear I'll never act like that again." "Oh my God, you were so clever and skillful. You didn't even hesitate." "Where did you learn it?" "I took a course." Emily laughed. "I used to go to the river in the village with the kids, and all sorts of things happened there. That's how I learned to look after the little ones for a few minutes. I'm going to run and change. You know why Stephen always cries when you pick him up? Because you're doing it wrong. And it's like you're afraid of him and you're clamping down. And babies can always sense that. Watch how you do it. I'll teach you how to do it." Stephen likes to be spoken to affectionately. He gets quiet. And Alice loves to be stroked gently, ever so gently. But Jerry loves it when I rock him and hold him against me. All babies are different. You just have to find an approach to each one. Angela heeded the advice and gently took Stephen, began to say something affectionately to him, smiling. And the baby too was moving his lips in a funny way, not crying. From that time, Emily and Angela became friends. They talked a lot. There was no trace of their former enmity. And Ryan's prim parents melted away. They accepted the nanny and considered her their own. The year flew by. The babies had already taken their first steps and didn't need much breastfeeding. Emily realized it was probably time to move out and start her own life. But something inexplicable was going on in her soul. During this time, she had grown so fond of the twins as relatives and could not even imagine how to part with them. And the kids themselves got used to play, walk and do everything in three, as if they were from the same family. All this time, Emily's friend Lillian called her often, asking her about everything and urging her, "You're an idiot, Emily. Why haven't you hit on Ryan yet? You should have married him long ago and lived like a queen instead of being a maid. Why are you so lost?" Emily didn't like that kind of talk and got angry. "What are you talking about, Lillian? Ryan only sees me as a babysitter. He's a decent man. How am I going to hang around his neck? Besides, who I am and who he is, it wouldn't have worked out anyway. He still pines for his wife. He often remembers her with such fondness. No, I can't do that. I can't do that." Lillian twiddled her thumbs. She thought to herself, "Well, whatever. But I'm not going to miss such a promising fiancé. I'll lie down in a suit and come back. But I'll make sure he notices me and falls in love with me." Carol began to systematically realize her plans, began to visit her friend, saying that she missed her. She pretended to be crazy about the children, bringing them presents. The housemates didn't mind her visits. After all, Lillian knew how to make dust in the eyes and show herself at her best. Yes, the guest was really attractive, bright brunette with outstanding forms. Ryan was also nice to her, but nothing more. No matter how hard she tried, he didn't show her any signs of attention, and Lillian was angry. Then one day there was a little party in Ryan's backyard. It was Angela's birthday. Young people were invited. Lillian was invited to join them. Everybody had fun, drank champagne, and then there was dancing and contests. That's when the cunning Lillian decided to act, and Ryan, who was already drunk, was already looking at her with interest. He invited her to a slow dance and hugged her so tenderly, and in the middle of a fast dance, Lillian suddenly twisted her leg, grimaced in pain, and began to fall to the floor. Ryan picked her up in his arms. "Oh, I think I twisted my leg," she mumbled. "Oh my God, it hurts. It's like I broke my leg. How am I going to get home now?" Lillian wailed. "Ryan, I'm so worried. Do you need to lie down? Let me take you to the back guest room, put some ice on it, make it feel better. And if it doesn't, you can stay here tonight and go home tomorrow." Lillian was overjoyed. It had happened just as she'd planned. The two of them never left the party that night, and the affair between Ryan and Lillian began. He adored her, gave her fancy gifts, dressed her like a doll. And of course, she soon moved into his house as his fiancée. The luxurious life quickly corrupted Lillian. She began to act insolent, almost bossy. She even began to tease her friend Emily, who was always running around the house, catering to her, and Ryan giving them all her time. "How many times can you do this?" Lillian resented her. "I'm sick of all this noise. Take the kids to the nursery. And anyway, Ryan and I are getting married soon. Is it right that you're still hanging around here? Why don't you think so? You don't give them any order, you let them do everything. And children need to be kept strict. I think Ryan and I can manage on our own. And 3 kids in the house is a bit much. So why don't you go find an apartment? You've already stayed here, girlfriend." Emily was taken aback by the insolence and retorted, "Aren't you a little conceited, Lillian? Not so long ago you couldn't have dreamed of a life like this. And now you're talking like this." I wanted to leave, but Ryan asked me to stay and keep working. So you didn't hire me, and you don't get to kick me out. And another thing, don't get your nose so high, it's gonna hurt when you fall. Ryan and I have been friends for years. I could tell him your true intentions. There's no love lost here. So I'd rather you didn't touch me, and I'd rather you didn't touch me. I didn't think you were like that, Lillian. Her ex-girlfriend had a grudge against Emily and was determined to get rid of her as quickly as possible. She decided to set her up by stealing the file. While Ryan wasn't home yet, but on her way out of the office, she was caught in the act by Angela. She'd been watching Lillian for a long time, keeping an eye on this smart girl, just like Emily had once done, trying to figure out what kind of person she was. Her brother had been too quick to marry her. She'd charmed him like she'd bewitched him. Angela literally grabbed her arm and asked, "What are you doing here?" Ryan had warned everyone not to let even the maid clean the place. "Why did you try to steal the file?" "You're some kind of spy. Maybe Ryan's competitors sent you. Come clean, bitch. I'm telling Ryan everything." Lillian turned pale and terrified. She didn't want to lose her fiancé and tried to justify herself. "Please, Angela, I'm sorry. Nobody sent me, and I don't know anything about this business stuff. Honestly, I'm not lying. I was just trying to set Emily up, you know? She doesn't belong in my future family with Ryan, and she's always hanging around. I mean, honestly, I'm jealous, and my blood is churning. I'm afraid that Ryan's gonna change his mind and look at my ex-girlfriend, so I did something stupid. And I'm sorry. I don't say anything to him. I love Ryan and I don't want to lose him." Angela wondered. Maybe she was lying. I mean, she'd wanted Emily to survive just as much as she'd wanted Emily to survive once. How was she better than Lillian? Jealousy sometimes drove people crazy. Angela sat down on the leather couch and patiently began to speak. "You know, I didn't like Emily at first either and tried to set her up, which I'm ashamed of. But she saved me in spite of that. Emily has been with us for a year now, and in that time, believe me, she hasn't even looked at Ben as a woman. They're just friends, nothing more. Look, Lillian. Emily is a close friend of mine now. I consider her a member of our family. You can't find a better nanny for your nephews. So just cut the crap and leave her alone. Okay, if Ben finds out, you're out of here, sweetheart. Understand?" The woman promised she wouldn't hurt again, but that was just an appearance. In reality, Lillian was just laying low, determined to get away sooner or later. Soon Angela fell in love and began dating a man. She was flying, working, getting ready to make sure her fiancé was the best. That day she was going to invite him to visit her. They decided to celebrate this solemn occasion at a restaurant. All the housemates left, and Emily stayed with the children. Time flew quickly. Soon it got dark. She put the children to bed and decided to drink tea in the kitchen and have a snack. Suddenly the front door opened. All the family members walked in, as well as Emily's ex-fiancé Ryan and his parents. Ben beckoned Emily over and introduced her. "Meet Emily, she's my baby's nanny, their nurturer. She's also a great friend and a wonderful person. We consider her a member of our family." And this, Emily threw sharply, interrupting him. "That's Ryan, the scoundrel who took me to the swamp instead of the registry office and dumped me there at his mother's behest. One thing I don't understand is, what did he forget here? Or did he find out he had a son? But I'll never let him anywhere near the child of such a mean daddy." Ryan blushed and paled, not knowing what to say. Ben was shocked. "So he is the scoundrel that did this to you. I remember how you suffered," cried, worried. "You've told me that story so many times. Sis, do you know who you've decided to marry? I guess Ryan forgot to tell you something." An argument ensued. Angela demanded an explanation. Her fiancé mumbled something inaudible, and his mother tried to get out of it. "Angela, my dear, don't be nervous. Think about it. How could I allow my only son to get involved with a village girl? I agree, we overdid it with that joke. But we didn't know about the pregnancy, so it's not our fault. It may not even be Ryan's baby, but that's a thing of the past. Why bring it up? The truth is, Ryan only loves you, and I'm happy. A bride like you is a dream come true. We've already talked about everything at the restaurant, haven't we?" Emily only shook her head and retired to the nursery. The groom and his mother were thrown out of the house. Her father threatened not to let them come back to the house. "You don't want to be related to such rascals. I'm not going to let this go. I can see why Ryan went to bed. The clown wanted money from my daughter. What the hell is wrong with you people? You ruined a man's life and you don't repent? I don't want a son-in-law like that, with his rotten black soul." Barbara and Ryan left without a word, humiliated. Ryan was truly ashamed, and his mother swore that she would make Emily's life fun. After the incident, Angela had become even better friends with Emily and was grateful to her for opening her eyes to her fiancé and his rotten family. After hearing what Emily had been through, Angela sympathized with her. "You're good, you're brave," she marveled. Still decided to have a baby, even though she realized that she herself will have to put him on his feet. "I'm always complaining about something. What a rascal that Ryan is. What love songs did he sing to me? What fancy bouquets did he give me? He said I was his greatest love, that he'd never met anyone like me, and I thought he was in such a hurry to get married." Emily grinned bitterly, cradling her son in her arms. "That's what he told me, word for word. And I, stupid me, loved him so devotedly. I believed everything. You have no idea how I felt when I was in the middle of nowhere on my wedding day. I don't know how I got through it. Thanks to your brother. I guess being a mom and taking care of my kids is what saved me. I didn't have time. Kids are like sunshine. They give such a charge of goodness and positivity. The more I took care of them, the faster my soul went away. The black thoughts evaporated. You know, at first I was really mad at Ryan, even hated him. Then I longed desperately for his arms. And now I'm hugging my son, and it feels so good. Jerry and I are a family now. We don't need anyone else. I'm also surprised at myself. I love Jerry, Stephen, and Alice equally. It's like they're all mine. I don't know how. Angela marveled. You're amazing. Honestly, I couldn't do that. You have such a good heart. But you can't give up on your personal happiness. We both managed to fall in love with the same bastard. So be it. Look at my brother. What's wrong with him? There are decent men out there. You and I will be lucky. Barbara was furious. She hated Emily. She'd ruined her wedding to such important people. And the news of her son's baby had made her furious. She was furious. Look, what a rascal. I thought she would run away to her village after such a disgrace. But no, she sneaked into the house and is already commanding as an equal. They believed her. We must make her get out of the way, get out of town, so that she would remember for a long time how to cross Sapinov's path. And then Barbara decided to probe the ground and speak cautiously to Lillian. She felt that this girl was not so simple as she seemed and could help her. And so she did. Or Lillian herself wanted to get even with her friend and get her thrown out in disgrace. So the two vipers came up with a terrible plan. On that day, there was no sign of trouble. Emily was out with the kids, as usual. Across the street from the mansion was a lovely playground. She was swinging Jerry and Alice on the swings, while Stephen was busy making rings in the sandbox. Lillian was also with her, helping her. It was hard to keep track of 3 fidgeters at once. But the kids asked to bring a big car, so Lillian went to the yard to look for the kids' favorite toy. When she came back, she gasped and screamed, "Emily, where's Stephen? He's not in the sandbox. Where did he go? What were you looking at?" The woman had a chill inside her. "I was looking at the paddles in the bucket. He was just there." She started running, screaming, looking for Stephen. And Lillian immediately, everyone was in a commotion. Until the evening, everyone was looking for the child. It seemed that the whole house turned against Emily. The parents were screaming. "What negligence! How could you do that? Pray that nothing happens to our grandson, or we'll put you in jail for a long time. How could you not notice that the child was missing?" Emily was in tears. "I was swinging the babies on the swing, and Stephen was making puppets. You know how he likes to play in the sand for a long time. He's so quiet, he never takes a step without me." Then Lillian went to get the car, but when she left, Stephen was there, and I fixed his cap. I don't know where he could have gone. It must have been stolen. I'm sorry, I don't know how it happened. Ben paced back and forth, calling the police several times, wondering who could have kidnapped the baby. Why, for ransom? Then why hasn't anyone called yet? Angela had been watching everyone in the meantime. She noticed that Lillian was overacting in public, sobbing, wringing her hands, and criticizing Emily more loudly than anyone else. It's strange, because she'd been so cool with the kids. She's just been playing with them for show, and that was when Ben was at home. But now she was suddenly so emotional. The girl gestured Ben away and shared her suspicions with him. "Brother, listen, you're all mad at Emily. She's been working for us for a year, and she's never had an accident. I mean, you see how she's got her hands full with the kids. I think Lillian's behind this. But take your rose-colored glasses off, take a closer look. She's an actress, and she's not a very good actress." And then Stephen disappeared just as Lillian was leaving the set. So she wouldn't be suspected. She's not as wonderful as you think she is. Do you know she's been living in your office, trying to steal documents and blame it on Emily, and now this terrible incident. But Ben didn't believe it. "Angela, why are you lumping everything together? Don't make a monster out of Lillian. She loves me, and we're getting married soon. But why steal Stephen? That's ridiculous. And how would she get it back if she never left the mansion?" The girl pressed her lips together. "All right, you may not believe me, but I'll prove I'm right. Can I have your chauffeur to help me and follow her carefully? I'm sure I'll find out something. Just do what you want. Out of my way. I'm thinking, who took my son and how do we find him? We've searched 2 blocks and there's no son anywhere. We've looked under every bush, in every crevice. Then he must have been stolen." There were 100 of them at the Smith mansion. Barbara carried the Kennedy boy in her arms, trying to keep him distracted and calm, and her husband read it. Galka the opal died. Then she brought someone else's baby home with her. What does it all mean? God, I'm going crazy with this screaming. Give me the boy, he's all twitchy. Gregory put the baby in a soft chair and left him alone, handing him a beautiful brightly colored box. Stephen calmed down a little and looked at it with interest. Barbara ranted. "Grisha, you head, shut up at last. How I got rid of small children. This is Stephen, the son of Ben Rounds. He also has a sister, Angela. He's a lovely boy, Isn't he? I bought him some vegetable formula, baby food. I'll go and open it. We should feed him. He's hungry, isn't he? Gregory resented it. This is all very entertaining. But what's a boy doing in our house? Did you steal him? I don't think Rounds would have given him to you willingly. You need to explain this to me right now. What are you getting our family into? Barbara tried to explain. Yes, Gregory, while our unfulfilled daughter-in-law was distracted, I quietly grabbed the boy and ran. He didn't realize it at first. He started yelling in the car. It's revenge. Gregory, have that branch kicked out of the rich house. She's ruined our wedding with her confessions. And our son's on his own again. We'll never be able to separate him like this. Enough, the kid will be kicked out. The babysitter will be back as soon as that happens. Don't worry. He'll stay with us for a while. We're not hurting him. I bought a whole bag of toys and sweets. My husband resented it. Barbara, you're a fool. Yeah, these big businessmen are probably all over town, with the police looking for Stephen. She's done something wrong. What if they find him here and we go to jail? Barbara just snorted. Why would we go to jail? I'll say that Lillian brought the baby to me and asked me to take care of it, and she went off on some errands. That's all. I'll give the baby to Round's fiancé, and she'll bring it back and make up a story about how and where she found it. Then her fiancé Ben will be grateful to her for the rest of his life for saving the baby, and they'll be married. So everyone is better off for this little adventure. Barbara opened a can of mashed potatoes and began to feed Stephen. Here's to Daddy. Here's to Mommy, that's a good boy. You're eating with gusto. You're gonna grow up big. An hour later, Lillian arrived at the mansion. The boy was already asleep. She became Chatterton. Barbara, everything went perfectly. Our plan worked. They're all over Emily, trying to kick her out. How's Stephen sleeping? Oh, good. I hope the babysitter gets kicked out tomorrow and I can take the boy back. I can't stand the sight of Ben. He's so upset. But when I give him his son back, he'll worship me. I'm telling you. The women didn't even realize they were being watched through the window. Angela prepared herself, armed with binoculars, and watched Barbara put the baby to bed. Ryan pulled up in front of the house. Angela rushed over to him, grabbed him by the pecs, and started shaking him. You rascal, you've decided to take revenge on me by kidnapping my nephew. But I'll arrange it for you now. Teacher, I'm calling the police right now, and both your mother and that woman will go to jail for kidnapping. Ryan slammed his eyes shut. He didn't understand a thing. Angela, wake up. What kid? What kidnapping? I was on a business trip, just got back. Who kidnapped? Who? The girl saw he wasn't lying, so she told everything. Ryan got really scared. Jesus, Mom, what have you done? You don't need the police. I'm going to get Stephen now and give him back. I'm sorry, please. I really didn't know. Wait here, don't call anywhere. I'll be quick. He had already managed to call his brother, and he rushed to get his son. Ryan entered the house, and without discernment, went to his mother's bedroom. Indeed, there was a baby sniffling peacefully on the bed. The boy quietly took him in his arms and began to leave. Barbara ran after him. Ryan, what are you doing? You screwed up our whole plan. I barely got that screamer to sleep. That's the way to do it. I'll tell you all about it later. Too late, Mom, you've made a mess of things. We're all going to jail now. Step aside. Let me pass. We have to get the boy back before Angela calls the police. Just then, Ben burst into the house. Stephen woke up, rubbing his eyes, and wanted to cry, but he saw his daddy and smiled. Immediately, he pulled his arms to him. The man hugged his son tightly and whispered, Jesus, alive, thank God. Everything will be all right now. Don't be afraid, son, Daddy is near. Angela filmed everything on her phone and said, That's it. Lovebirds, you've been caught. What's up, Lillian? I wanted to set my friend up again, but you're a bitch. Now I hope my brother realizes who he wanted to be with, and I think you belong with Ryan. You two deserve each other. One left his bride in the middle of nowhere on her wedding day. The other kidnapped the son he loved. I can't get my head around that. Ben didn't want to scare his son and said dryly, Be warned, I won't let it go. I'll wipe you off the face of the earth, and you, Lillian, get out of my house, and I'll deal with you too. Barbara tried to get out of it. Ben, you've got it all wrong. This has nothing to do with us at all. It's your fiancé's idea. She brought Stephen to me, asked me to keep an eye on him, and what do? I love kids. We were playing with him, and he ate and fell asleep. Well, I'm sorry, it was a stupid situation. Ben took his son home. Lillian kicked him out, and his father, when he found out about it, was so angry that he ruined the family in just 2 months, filed a bunch of lawsuits through the courts and sent them out into the world. They became destitute. All their accounts were frozen. The house went under the hammer for debt. Ryan couldn't communicate with his mother anymore either. She had ruined his whole life without realizing it. He went along with it. The guy came to Ben's house several times, asked for forgiveness, and then went far north to earn money, cutting off all relations with his mother. Barbara's husband went blind and 6 months later died of a heart attack. A bent, money-hungry, envious woman walked the streets like a lost woman begging for alms. She had to go to work part-time as a cleaner, scrubbing floors in a store. It was so humiliating for her. In just over a year, Barbara was unrecognizable. She went from being a businessman's wife to a pathetic old woman, and deservedly so. She'd brought so much grief to so many people and never repented. Surprisingly, only after the kidnapping of his son Ben suddenly looked at Emily differently, as if for the first time he noticed her as a woman. He began to realize that he couldn't find a better wife and mother for his children. He loved Jerry as much as he loved his own children, and had long considered him his own. Emily's birthday was approaching, and Ben decided to confess his feelings to her and propose. Emily slept sweetly and soundly. Amazingly, the babies didn't wake up once. That rarely happened. The woman woke up when the sun was already shining through the window. She jumped up. How could it be? How could she have overslept? After all, it was long past the baby's mealtime. And how quiet was the nursery? Strange. She rushed to the crib, but the babies weren't there. Emily rubbed her eyes, threw on her robe, and was about to run out into the hallway when the door opened and Ben entered the room. He was holding a tray with 2 cups of coffee and croissants on it. He looked conspiratorial. The woman was taken aback. Ben had never entered without knocking before. She began to fix her hair. She was embarrassed that he had caught her like this, but Ben said, "Good morning, birthday girl. Calm down, I can see the panic in your eyes. The kids are going to be with Angela and my parents today. You go to bed. Here's your breakfast. I made it myself with cinnamon and licorice. I hope you like it." Emily glowed. Ben had never paid her any attention before. It felt so good. She'd forgotten the last time she'd enjoyed breakfast in bed. Usually she was up from early in the morning. "Thank you, Ben. No one's ever said hello like that before. I forgot it was my birthday." "It's not a birthday greeting. It's just something to get you in the mood. Let's get some breakfast and go make magic for the best woman in the world. I want you to remember this day as the best and the happiest. So get ready. I'm waiting for you downstairs." The woman's heart was ready to jump out of her chest. She exulted. "Oh my God, did I really hear that? Ben called me the best woman ever. Did he finally feel for me the way I've felt for him for a long time? I can't believe it." Emily really did remember that day for a long time. First they went to the spa. There she was treated by skillful professionals. 2 hours later, she was beautiful. Ben admired her. She was so good, and how had he never noticed it before? Next on the agenda was a pleasure boat ride. Emily squealed with delight and cheered like a child. It had been a long time since she'd had such a good time. And in the evening, they found themselves in an expensive restaurant. A table had already been reserved there. The lovers dined, drank wine, and danced. It was time for the most important gift. The man took out a beautiful velvet box, put a ring on Emily's finger, and whispered, "My beautiful nanny." "Emily, I don't know how to speak beautifully, but I want to say the most important thing. Be my wife. I can't imagine my house without you. The kids call you mommy every so often. After Jerry, I think you and I are going to make a great family." Emily threw herself into his arms and said, "Yes." A month later, they had a beautiful, lavish wedding. It was in all the newspapers. The pictures showed the whole family together, happy Emily in a white dress, understanding Ben, his parents, his sister, and all 3 kids. The headlines trumpeted, "Ben Rounds and his family are happy together." Lillian sang cheap wine and tore the newspaper to pieces, stomping on it in her rented room. She was so disappointed that Emily had beaten her to the punch and Ben had married her, and she was out of the picture. After her luxurious life in the expensive mansion, she couldn't bear to be in that stuffy, poor room. Even the walls seemed to crush her. She had dreamed of finding a rich husband and living the good life. But why should Emily be the lucky one, and not her? Envy and anger ate away at Lillian's soul. The day after the celebration at the restaurant, Ben said decisively, "All right, Ashley, we're all going to pack up and go to the village to meet your parents. You've never talked about them. You never even invited them to the wedding." That was wrong. They've never even seen their grandson. What's wrong with that? Emily wanted to meet her father-in-law. Emily even turned pale and tried to justify herself. "Don't you understand? I have a lot of resentment towards my dad. He was always too strict. He didn't understand me. He wanted to marry me without love. I'm very resentful of him. I don't think it's a good idea to go." But her husband wouldn't listen to anything. "Darling, you are no longer a child, a mother yourself. Forget childish resentments. Now think of your parents. They must be pining. So you have to make peace. Someone has to make the first move." Emily sighed and agreed. Her husband was right. It was her own fault. Could have called first. She'd been selfish, nursing a grudge. She'd longed to hug her mommy and tell her everything. A lot had changed in the years she'd been away. Evelyn had become ill often because of her longing for her daughter, and she had withdrawn into her grief. Bob realized that he had been too strict. He began to treat his wife more gently. He no longer shouted, banged his fist on the table, or scolded his wife. He saw her talking to her daughter's portrait at night, kissing it, and his own heart was bleeding when 2 huge SUVs drove into the village. The locals whistled and went to find out who the important guests were. Emily stood on the doorstep of her home, tears rolling from her eyes. The same floral curtains, carved shutters, and rooster on the roof. The children looked around in wonder, talking in their own language. Ben knocked on the window, and when he saw Bob, a stout man, on the threshold, he immediately extended his hand cheerfully. "Good afternoon, Bob. My name is Ben. We've come to visit you as a family. Please welcome us." The landlord looked guiltily into his daughter's eyes. He couldn't stand it, walked over and, probably for the first time in his life, ineptly hugged her with his big Calouse haze. "Hello, daughter. Mother and I have been waiting for you for a long time. Come in, dear guests. Evelyn, look who has come to see us. Daughter and grandchildren, son-in-law, matchmakers." The woman couldn't believe her eyes. She sobbed and kissed Emily, stroked her grandchildren, and smiled happily. "My daughter, my clever girl. How I prayed to God for you to come. How I missed you. I thought I would never see you again. He's changed a lot. He doesn't hurt me anymore. He missed you too." Emily cried. You'll forgive me. How selfish of me. I held grudges in my heart too. I was afraid to show my face. Mommy, let's sort out the bags. We brought so much stuff. We'll celebrate our second wedding day." Within an hour, the whole family was happily relaxing. Ben's parents, though accustomed to delicacies, were happily eating homemade sausages, lard, and pies. A happy and proud Bob sat his grandchildren on his lap and pampered them. How glad he was that his daughter was back, that there were no more hard feelings, that she had such a good family. Emily felt unusually light and peaceful, even though she had to go through many trials. But now she is a happy mother and wife, and this is the most important reward. The shoe was stuck in the iron bars and would not leave its new shelter. Emily even cursed, looked around, and freed her foot from the temporary trap. The shoe was still in place, so she crouched down and began to pull the unfortunate shoe, trying not to scratch the heel. She was going to meet a very important person, from whose gaze such a detail as a spoiled shoe would not be hidden. It was better not to risk it. The iron bars clamped down on the heel like an angry bull terrier on a chop. But Emily wasn't used to giving up so easily. She didn't care that she was standing with one foot in the dust, and the sharp stones were tearing her pantyhose. As luck would have it, there was no one around, and she couldn't even ask for help. "I don't care," she shrieked. "Not without spitting on the shoe. You think I can't do it without you? You bet I can, even if I'm barefoot. Can I help you?" A man's voice suddenly sounded above her ear. Emily flinched and turned around. In front of her stood a handsome young man in overalls. Ouch. The girl was confused. "Yes, I could use some help. You see, I'm stuck." The guy, without asking unnecessary questions, deftly extracted the shoe from the trap and handed it to Emily. From the outside, it all looked like a shabby prince offering Cinderella to try on a crystal slipper on a high stiletto. Emily embarrassedly snatched the shoe from the stranger's hands, deftly put it on her foot, and smiled. "You are, you might say, my savior. I was about to say goodbye to her, but then you showed up. You shouldn't have." Laughed the guy. "The shoes are expensive, I can tell. You shouldn't throw it away so easily. Besides, there are no hopeless situations in life. Never give up, even if it seems that everything is lost." "I'll do my best," Emily smiled and waved goodbye to the stranger. It was only a couple houses away from their destination. Emily sped up her steps, as she didn't want to be late. John Smith was already waiting for her in the park's cozy coffee shop at his usual spot. Emily went straight to the man. "Emily, my dear." John got up from the sofa and looked at her from head to toe. "You look beautiful. You always do." "Thank you." Emily blushed slightly. "John, will you excuse me for being late? Was there an emergency?" No, I'm the one who's early." The man hastened to reassure her, but Emily saw the faintest flicker of displeasure in his eyes. "Let's not waste time. I'll show you everything at once." Emily took out of her bag a voluminous catalog and put it in front of her. "Is there anything interesting?" The man perked up immediately. "I think so." Emily nodded. "You know John Smith. I always show everything to you first. You're on our payroll. We just finished the catalog. Sarah Thompson sent me straight to you. A lot of Chinese porcelain this time. As I recall, that's your subject, isn't it? Oh yes. John's eyes lit up, and he poured himself greedily into the catalog. I, of course, more on imperial porcelain. You know what my collection is, but I will not refuse china. And in the price is always growing, and pleasing to the eye. You've seen how filigree always these vases and statuettes are executed. Emily worked in a private gallery, and John was considered one of the biggest art connoisseurs in town. He was an avid collector, investing heavily in antiquities. Emily was his favorite agent, introduced them to Henry Johnson, who devoted his entire life to antiques. John was his longtime friend, and they had once hunted for precious art together. Porcelain was their shared passion. But as Henry grew older, his passion waned because of illness. Grandfather liked Emily's passion for antiquities. When she was a baby, they spent hours in his store. She would gaze breathlessly at the porcelain figurines that reflected the spirit of different eras and peoples. Henry told her a million stories with enthusiasm. This hobby eventually turned into a profession. Emily graduated from the Institute of Culture and received a specialty of restorer. And then, thanks to her grandfather's connections, she began working at the local state gallery. The profession was not monetary, but very interesting. Emily fiddled enthusiastically with reactive special restoration mixtures and literally restored masterpieces, which were about to fall into oblivion. It seemed to her a real miracle. The girl didn't need much money. Her grandfather was a rich man by the standards of the city. He did not drive his favorite granddaughter to work until exhaustion. Emily's passion flattered him. In addition, he was frankly proud that he was able to instill in the girl a love for what he himself valued most of all. But a few years passed, and Emily was offered a promising position in a newly opened private gallery. Its owner, Sarah Thompson, was an old acquaintance of her grandfather, so the career quickly went uphill. Starting as an assistant, Emily quickly settled in and after a year became a senior art historian. She was not only well-versed in art, but also able to find a common language with the most fastidious clients. John Smith was one of them. "Nice selection, John," announced in a high-pitched tone as he closed the catalog. "Can you give me this edition for a couple of days? I can tell you now that I would like to buy a couple of things, but I'd like to look at them in more detail. At my age, moods change dramatically. In case something else catches my fancy. I like to contemplate. Even photographs can sometimes fascinate me enough to make me want to own the original." Of course, the girl nodded. "You only please do not delay, because Sarah Thompson wants to organize an exhibition, a presentation. In 2 months, it is necessary to prepare the exposition. I've already invited so many guests that I feel I won't be able to rest. You know what's on me? You, my girl, don't worry." The man patted her hand. "I'll give you a final answer one of these days. I'll call Sarah myself. I'll tell her what I need to postpone." Emily left the cafe with a sigh of relief. Don't worry about the commission, she told herself. The main thing is to have time to prepare the exposition. Also, the house is a mess. What's wrong? John Smith was worried. Is there anything I can do to help? I can. The girl shook her head. No, it's all right. Just personal problems. It all came together at once. Don't be silent, Emily, if I can help, John Smith offered. Thank you. Okay, I'll leave the catalog. Then I'll call you as soon as I decide. In the meantime, I'm going to run an errand. I'll see you later. Say hi to Grandpa, she said. I'll be sure to tell him. Would you stop by and see him? I rarely get to him, and he's not feeling well. His heart is racing. Emily sighed. Yes, I'm afraid for him, too. Don't worry, my girl, everything will be fine. Emily said goodbye and walked out. There was no more business scheduled for today. Sarah Thompson said to go home right after the meeting. But Emily didn't feel like going home at all. She went to the nearest candy store and bought a couple of air cakes. Holding the brightly colored box tightly, the girl headed toward the house on the waterfront where her grandfather lived. It took a long time for the door to be opened. Emily didn't have her keys. The visit to her grandfather's house had been unplanned. Strangely, she pounded her knuckles on the door anxiously. Where could he have gone? And the phone was silent. He'd forgotten it again. What kind of person knows I worry when he doesn't pick up the phone? Emily was about to leave when Henry finally opened the door. Emily, what a joy. I didn't see that coming. Why did you come without calling? The girl was indignant and hugged her grandfather tightly. You don't answer yourself. I'm worried. Come on, Henry waved her away. I just fell asleep. It happens at my age. I got up early in the morning. Well, that's good, Grandpa. Look what I brought. Emily squinted enigmatically and showed me a box of brownies. I know it's bad for you, but what's life without sweets? That's true, sweetheart, Henry laughed. Let's not eat until 6, or the nurse will be here to give me my shots. If she sees me, I'm in trouble. But we still have 40 minutes, nodded her granddaughter. I'll stay with you for a while, or they'll lose me at home. Tell me, how are you doing? Because you look pale, tired. I'm fine. I've got a lot of work to do. We're getting ready for the new exhibition. I just met John Smith. He says hello to you. He said he'd drop by. John? Henry chuckled. I haven't seen him in a while. He's been away on business. I wish he'd come to see an old friend more often. He's probably looking for something better for himself again. Yeah, they brought in a lot of Chinese porcelain. I handed him the catalog and his eyes lit up. I could tell he had his eye on a couple of pieces. I remember back in the day. I'd like to buy something myself, but what's the point? There's no point in collecting anymore. I don't have much time left. Come on, Grandpa, full of pessimism. You're only 76, you've got a lot of years ahead of you. We have a good heredity. Your father lived to be 100 years old. Are you burying yourself already? It's no big deal if you have a bad heart. It's not a problem with the current level of medicine. The main thing is to take care of yourself. You should come and see me more often. When I see you, I immediately feel young. You have such positive energy. I'd love to, but you know I don't have time. And at home. That witch is driving me crazy again. Alex, why don't you get involved? I would never let my mother treat my wife like that. It's about time you two got your own place. 5 years of marriage and still in the same place. And there's an empty apartment. Alex doesn't want to Emily's side. He says it's your apartment and he's uncomfortable. He's uncomfortable. Henry was indignant. Are you comfortable with her constant nagging? Why does she dislike you so much? I don't know. It was tolerable before, but for the last 6 months she's been going off the rails. It's none of my business, granddaughter. But I think if you want a quiet family life, you should move out. It's only going to get worse. I know that kind of woman. She won't rest until she's completely dried you up. And the kids will come. What then? Grandpa suddenly got serious. Emily, you know that Alex and I can't have children. That's why Lubov Markovna is so mad. She wants grandchildren, and I can't. When she found out that I have such a disorder in my body, she started her attacks. It feels like she's deliberately trying to break us up so that he'll find another woman who'll give birth to an heir. And what an inheritance. All they have behind them is an apartment and a shabby cottage. If I were your mother-in-law, on the contrary, I would protect you. If I die, you'll inherit everything. Grandpa, why do you say that? Emily was upset. John and I love each other. He's never been interested in your money. Well, maybe not to him, but I had the honor of talking to Lubov Markovna. She kept trying to find out the size of my capital. You can't choose your relatives, girl, but to live with them on the same territory is to put nails in your coffin. Come on, we'll be fine, Emily said. I'm at work most of the time, John too. We only see each other in the evenings. And on weekends, Lubov Markovna usually goes either to the country or to her friends. I see how well you're doing. You're not even in a hurry to get home. I'm not in a hurry, because I came to you and want to spend more time here, smiled Emily. So what if your mother-in-law is a witch? Every other family is like that, and they live. I feel sorry for you. Emily. Henry patted her on the head. I just want you to be happy. I am happy. Hugged his granddaughter. I have a man I love, a job I love. I don't need anything else. I just have you all to myself, Henry smiled. My parents have suffered so much in their lives and lost them early. That's what I'm worried about. I understand, Grandpa. Emily poked him on the cheek. But believe me, I'm fine. By the way, you know I got my heel caught in a grate today, stuck on the sidewalk. Barely made it out. Well, at least there are still some kind people out there. At 6 a.m. sharp, the doorbell rang. It was the nurse. Emily stayed at her grandfather's house for a short time and went home. It was raining outside. The girl called a cab and in 10 minutes stood at the door to her apartment. Alex was not at home. Emily was even surprised. The clock was already showing the 9th hour. He was usually back by this time. But Lyubov Markovna met her on the doorstep. "And where do we go?" grumbled unhappily mother-in-law. "I was at work, then I slipped off somewhere." "And why do you ask?" Calmly replied Emily. "Where did she get off?" "I came home, no wife, no wife." "And where is he?" "I thought he hadn't come back yet," Emily wondered. "Would you pick up the phone when your husband calls?" "Maybe I would." Emily looked at the screen of her smartphone, puzzled. "I always answer the phone. How can you be so irresponsible?" Love boiled. "But I don't have any missed calls or messages." "Where did he call?" "To his workplace." "I don't take it with me after I leave the gallery." "Should you? You're supposed to be in touch." "I am." Emily was indignant and felt the anger beginning to boil inside her. "He's not stupid. He should know that if I don't answer at work, I should call on my cell phone." "Okay, it's all just silly. I'm telling you, Lyubov Markovna, you know, I went to my friends. Said he won't be back tonight." "What do you mean he's not coming back?" Emily's eyebrows went up. "Just like that," the mother-in-law said, hiding her face in a smile. "They went fishing." "You don't have to wait until Sunday." "But why didn't he even warn me?" Emily didn't understand what was going on. "Why would he warn you? He's a grown man. It's the weekend." "Or are you against your husband having his own time? You know, girl, this kind of control isn't going to do any good." "On to what kind of control?" Emily raised her voice. "Do I tell him not to do anything? Just call and say he's going away. Especially for almost 3 days." Emily immediately dialed her husband's number, but his phone was off. "Don't even try to reach him," Cynthia gritted through her teeth. "There's no reception. He's on the road at 03000 hours. He said he'll call when he's online." "That's ridiculous." Emily shook her head. "Okay, if you say so, then that's the way it is. I don't see the point in taking this argument any further. I'm tired, Cynthia. Can't I just go and rest?" "I haven't cooked dinner?" Her mother-in-law grinned maliciously. "Still no. You can cook something for yourself. And now we've completely relaxed. Do you even remember the last time you stood at the stove?" "I don't understand," Cynthia snapped suddenly. "Emily, as I recall, you fiercely defended my right to stand at the stove. It was all girls you can't. He doesn't like it. Mommy knows best." "Thank you so much for taking over the cooking, but I didn't ask you to. If you don't want to cook for yourself without problems, I will. Besides, no one canceled delivery. Don't get excited. I won't starve to death." "How you talk. Indignant mother-in-law. Don't forget, my dear, that you live in my apartment, and therefore, according to my rules, you haven't opened your mouth in front of Alex. I'll tell him all about the way you treat me. Do whatever you want." Emily shouted. "Do you think I'm stuck in your apartment like this? I don't know how you work Alex so hard to keep him from moving out. But I promise, as soon as he gets back, I'll bring it up again." On Saturday, Cynthia left for the cottage. Even awake, Emily was glad to see her gone. Her mother-in-law, as expected, had not prepared breakfast, but the girl was not upset. She quickly kneaded the dough and fried a mountain of appetizing pancakes, which almost all ate. Emily's figure wasn't something to be watched. She was one of those rare breeds that no matter what you fed them, they would still be slim and neat. Emily was happy with her constitution, because with a busy work schedule, she could not train in the gym, and sit on a diet was impossible. So much energy was expended during the day that if she ate a meager diet, she would just faint on the way, eating the last pancake. Emily washed the dishes and dialed Alex's phone. It was still silent. "Well, you've got to be kidding," the girl thought. "You have to leave like that and not say a word." I bet Cynthia was whispering nonsense to him. She swore she'd tell me everything. She's a chatterbox. Well, it's easier to ignore it. I'd better think of something to do today. It's a day off, after all. The weather's nice. Maybe go to the cemetery. It's been a long time since I've been there. I'd like to take Grandpa with me. "Hello, Grandpa," Emily said excitedly into the receiver when Henry answered. "My little birdie, greetings. I wasn't expecting you. What are you doing home so early?" "Grandpa, listen. I was thinking maybe we could visit my parents at the cemetery. It's been a while. Wouldn't you like to see them? Let's go, of course, Grandpa said. Aren't you with your husband today? He's gone. I'm all alone at home. So I thought, when will I ever get away again? Come on, get ready. I'll call a cab and we'll go together. I'll be right there. Emily got dressed and went outside. She went into a flower shop and bought some white lilies, then called a cab and went to her grandfather's house. Henry was already waiting for her in the driveway. He looked quite alert. Apparently, the new medication his doctor had prescribed was doing its job well. There was even a blush on his cheeks. "Hi, Grandpa," kissed his granddaughter when he got into the cab. "And you are fresh and alert. I'll watch this, because yesterday I saw how that nurse tortured me. They don't make women like that these days." "Where'd you find her?" "She'd get me out of this world if I needed her." "You like it?" She laughed. "You're just lonely. That nurse is a good nurse. Sarah Thompson recommended her to me. She used to babysit her mom? Tough. Yeah, I bet she is. But she's good at her job, and I'm sure you'll always have plenty to talk about." "Oh yes," suppressed a chuckle grandfather. "This lady will surprise everyone. I had no idea she was so interested in art. Not as a professional, of course, but still. We talked to her for hours. It's not boring." I'm glad Emily laid her head on her grandfather's shoulder. "And I bought flowers for Mom and Dad. Look how pretty they are." "Yeah, Amber loved those. We had a flower garden at our old house. Your grandmother always planted white lilies. Little Snail, always hiding in the flower bed, getting pollen all over her. And we'd run around looking for them." "How many years has it been?" The cab pulled up to the cemetery. Emily and her grandfather got out in front of the massive cast-iron gate and headed down the main avenue into the depths. Along the way, they looked at the figurative monuments, the birds singing very loudly. Autumn was coming, but it was still very warm. The sun was shining in summer. Breaking through the thick, not yet begun to yellow leaves, thousands of sun bunnies lay on the paving stones. At last they reached the place. A tall monument of gray granite cast a large shadow. From the polished slab smiled a man and a woman, forever imprinted on the soulless stone. Emily's fingers touched the cold, smooth slab. She gently stroked the faces and placed the flowers she'd brought in a vase, taking the dried bouquet from there. "Hello," Amber Henry murmured. "And hello, Fred. I'm sorry we don't come to see you often enough. I've gotten so bad. I think I'm going to join you for good." "Grandfather, are you at it again?" Emily frowned. "Mom, Dad, don't listen to him. I'll take care of Grandpa. You'll have to be without him for a while." Emily's parents died together. Both had a passion for mountain climbing. Henry Johnson, who lost his wife early, guarded his daughter Amber more than any treasure. But the girl was very active and ambitious. When she married Fred, her classmate, her happiness was boundless. Henry did not like his son-in-law, although he had practically no common interests with him. But it was enough for him to know that Fred loved Amber and would do anything for her. The energetic young couple had been interested in mountaineering since college. When Amber and Fred were in the same course, Henry didn't like his daughter's hobby much. After all, each ascent was associated with a huge risk. But it was useless to dissuade Amber. With Fred's appearance, Henry calmed down a little. The strong man could always back up his fragile wife, and he chose less dangerous routes. Often the couple confined themselves to the climbing wall. And when Amber got pregnant and completely abandoned their hobby, with the birth of Emily in the house came great joy. The girl was not by years of development. Early learned to walk and talk. Parents actively engaged in her education, enrolled in many circles, giving the child the opportunity to choose a class to his liking. But most of all, little Emily liked to spend time in the antique shop of her grandfather, where she often ran away. Parents did not even guess that their daughter was truant. After all, every night she was met by a smiling grandfather, covering up his granddaughter's secret hobbies. When Emily went to the 3rd grade, her parents suddenly informed her that soon they planned to go to Elbrus. The conquest of this mountain peak was their longtime shared dream. After almost 10 years of break, going to the mountains was quite dangerous. But as Fred liked to joke, a mountaineer is forever a mountaineer. No one could have imagined that this trip would be the last of their lives. The deaths of the Henry couple were reported a week after Amber and Fred left. Emily still remembered how her grandfather had turned pale and literally shrunk in front of his eyes when he heard the terrible news on the phone. Details were scarce, both had gone off a cliff. Fred's anchor failed and he, who was the first to go, fell off, pulling Amber, who had not had time to secure the hook. They didn't find the bodies right away. Emily didn't remember the funeral well. Both she and her grandfather were in a kind of oblivion, unwilling to accept the terrible truth. Numerous relatives and family friends took it upon themselves to organize the funeral, wake, and other events. Emily abandoned her studies, stopped talking. Grandfather, on the contrary, went to work, hired for his granddaughter governesses, but after closing the shop rushed home to make sure that Emily is all right. He hired a psychologist who came to the girl every day and had heartfelt conversations with her, talking himself, constantly looking for ways to bring his granddaughter out of her mental state. For a 10-year-old girl, what happened was a true nightmare, because her parents were almost everything to her. Gradually, Emily came to her senses. Riding lessons helped. At first, Henry simply brought his granddaughter to the racetrack. The psychologist claimed that an-on therapy is very effective for the treatment of mental traumas. Emily treated them with sugar and apples. The girl gradually began to talk and then asked to climb on the horse. Henry did not spare any money for his granddaughter. Visits to the racetrack became regular. He even bought her her own horse, for which Emily came to the stall twice a week. Over the years, the wound healed. She and her grandfather often traveled to the cemetery, where they could hold conversations with the smiling and eternally frozen faces of Amber and Fred. After graduating from high school, Emily enrolled in the Art Institute. She liked studying. She still continued to live with her grandfather, although he bought a separate apartment for his granddaughter. But the girl did not want to distance herself from the most beloved man in the world. Everything changed when she began to work in the State Gallery. Only weekends Emily could spend time with her grandfather. On weekdays, she often stayed late, trying to restore another time-damaged masterpiece. That day, Emily stayed longer than usual. A large collection of ancient mosaics had been brought in, and the entire staff was hard at work piecing together the smallest details. Emily returned home at midnight, having given her grandfather advance notice. When she entered the apartment, she immediately sensed something amiss. Henry rarely went to bed before 2 in the morning, and this time he didn't even come out to greet his granddaughter and offer a late dinner, as was his custom. Emily noticed the light on in the kitchen. She ran in without even taking her shoes off. Henry was lying on the floor with his arms out to the sides. Emily's heart clenched. On woozy legs, she walked over to her grandfather and tried to feel for a pulse. There was no heartbeat. Terrified, Emily dialed the ambulance and waited. She immediately remembered everything she'd been taught in her life safety class, direct cardiac massage, CPR. In desperate attempts, Emily pressed on her grandfather's chest and sobbed. Suddenly, he let out a long wheeze and hissed. Emily's heart sank. She began to kiss her grandfather, flooding his face with her tears. The ambulance came quickly, but by then Henry had regained consciousness. He flatly refused to be hospitalized, but Emily was adamant. They learned later that Henry Johnson was suffering from heart failure. And if Emily had returned a minute later that day, there was nothing that could have been done. But fate had it differently. Since then, a woman has been working at the house as a housekeeper and caregiver on a full-time basis. Emily quit and got a job in a private gallery, where the schedule was more gentle. It was there that she met Alex. Alex only came over on Sunday evenings. Emily sat in her room, trying not to attract her mother-in-law's attention. Emily greeted her husband angrily, finally. "What's the meaning of this?" "No matter what I start, it's all to no avail." Alex brushed it off. "I'm tired and hungry." "Alex, are you serious? You've been gone for 2 days. You didn't even give me any notice that you were leaving, and now you're just ignoring it. Why do I have to report back? I called you to warn you, but you didn't even pick up the phone, and it's my fault again. I'm not accusing you of anything, but that's not how it works. And you called my work number, even though you know my main number perfectly well. That's enough. I wanted to go out and the guys called me. I explained everything to my mom. She didn't say anything to you." "She did. She did. That's a separate conversation. After all, I am your wife. Interfering with my mom is not the best solution, especially since you know how she feels about me." Alex got angry. "You two are both pecking at me. You can't seem to split something." "What did she do to you?" "Nothing, but I got to her. I don't know what the argument was about. You're always on her side, even when you see she's wrong. You respect her age. How silly is that? She's not old, there's nothing wrong with her head. Though I'm beginning to doubt it. Alex pressed his lips together. I don't know what happened between you two. I can only guess about another scandal. I'll talk to her, but please be patient. I'm already patient to the last of my strength. She started badgering me about my food. Please, let's go away. We have somewhere to live. I can't be on the same property with her anymore. Honey, you know that apartment is very far from my work. It's inconvenient to drive every day. I don't want to get up half an hour early. And you probably won't like cooking and cleaning. Your mother runs the whole house. That's all excuses. A million women can handle the work and the household. And I can do it, please, Alex, at least think about it. I just can't do it anymore. I'd rather sacrifice time than slowly destroy my psyche and my marriage. Alex kissed Emily's forehead. Okay, I'll think about it and talk to my mom. By the way, where's the fish? What fish? We were just relaxing in nature. Why bring home ruffles? Emily wondered. We could have dried them. I like mixed river fish, but Mom would blow our minds over fish hanging on the balcony. Alex laughed. No way. Okay, let's go out to dinner. I'm awfully hungry. You go by yourself. I don't want to see Cynthia Lewis right now. Besides, I've already eaten. Come back soon, I miss you. 2 months passed. Alex still hadn't thought about moving, citing his busy work schedule. He stayed late every day. Emily almost didn't notice it because she was working, preparing for the exhibition, even spending her weekends in the gallery. She was glad, because she didn't have to cross paths with her mother-in-law. But with her husband, too, she almost never saw him. In the evenings, Alex was in a bad mood, went to bed and turned away. In the morning, he was already rushing to work. The presentation at the gallery was very successful. Many exhibits were sold. Even Grandpa was pleased with his presence. But after the event, Sarah Thompson called Emily aside. Emily, she began softly. I know you've been working hard and must be pretty tired. The girl smiled a little shyly. I have a little business proposition for you. Basically, I'd like you to take a vacation next month, because you're not wearing your face. But Emily, sensing some kind of a catch. I have to go somewhere, Sarah Thompson exhaled. They know and they don't travel much. But I've got a lot on my plate here right now. I can't trust anyone else. Where to? New York. Emily for a week, 2 weeks tops. An old acquaintance of mine has something of interest there. He's willing to give us a huge collection of copperware and silverware to sell. You can't miss out on something like that. We need to drive around, see what he has interesting. Pick up options for our gallery. He's got paintings, too. I've been wanting one for a long time. The man's not old. He's been sitting on his treasures like a stingy knight. Now he's selling them off. And you entrust me with such a responsible assignment? Emily was surprised. Who else? You've been working for me for so long, I couldn't find a better specialist. Besides, you alone can correctly assess the collection, estimate the restoration work. I'll pay you everything, don't worry, and I won't hurt you with the bonus. I'd go myself, but you know what I mean. Okay, Emily said after thinking about it. I'll go. It's a little tense at home right now, and I didn't want to leave my grandfather alone. I promise you, I'll stop by Henry Johnson's house a couple times. It's been a long time since we've had a heart-to-heart. Don't worry about it. You'll have a good time. It's New York. Thomas Wilson, our client, has a very interesting house, right on Fifth Avenue, an old mansion. I assure you, this trip will do you good, and you'll learn a lot about yourself as a professional. Okay, you got it, Emily smiled. I hope Alex won't mind too much. Alex didn't mind. He was even glad that Emily was going on a business trip. What's so weird about it? Alex was surprised. I'm very happy for you. I'd love to go to New York for a week or two, especially at someone else's expense. I'm so tired on vacation. It's time. Speaking of vacations, Emily was embarrassed. Sarah Thompson promised me a vacation next month. Maybe you should take one too, go on a vacation somewhere, especially since I'll be well paid for my business trip. Can we go to the seaside? And the commission after the exhibition is decent. That would be nice, Alex winked. We'll think about it. You go for now and don't worry about anything. and Mom will calm down. She is often provoking conflicts again these days. By the way, you still haven't decided anything about moving. Honey, let's do it after New Year's. You won't be back until mid-December. Who moves before the holidays? What's the big deal? New Year's Eve, new house. It's all very symbolic. I'm not going to giggle and beat my hands. This is how I leave my mom alone on a holiday. Let's do this, you come back, then we'll celebrate, then we'll go on vacation, and then we'll move in. Promise. The girl exclaimed, surprised at her husband's flexibility. I promise. Alex nodded and pressed his wife against him. The trip to New York was very successful. Thomas Wilson turned out to be a pleasant elderly man confined to a wheelchair. He enthusiastically told Emily about his huge collection, showed all his treasures, accompanying it all with fascinating stories. Free time, and there was a lot of it, the girls spent for walks. The Big Apple was in full swing preparing for the celebration of the new year. Rich illumination on the streets created the illusion of a fairy tale. Emily had traveled to New York City twice before. As a child with her parents and when she studied at the Institute. Now she just admired the city, went to warm herself in coffee shops, took a lot of pictures and reported everything to her grandfather. They often communicated by video. Henry Johnson loved this city. As a young man, he often traveled to New York for work and stayed there for long periods of time. It was here that he met his future wife, but never returned after her death. Grandpa. Emily enthusiastically broadcast as she showed Henry Johnson the Kazan Cathedral glowing brightly in the evening landscape. We should definitely come here together. Where would I go, little girl? Laughed grandfather. I'm not old enough to travel. I've seen enough of your happy face. No, grandfather, Emily resisted. It's not the same. It's more solemn in person. It smells like a holiday. Let's come in the summer, promise me. I know you love Peter. I do, Emily, but I'm afraid I won't live to see the summer, frowned grandfather. Emily, your death books again. I'm not talking to you. I'm done. All right, agreed, let's go. But you were going on vacation to the sea this winter. I'll have a lot of things to do in the summer. I'll make a deal, Sarah Thompson. She comes here a lot. We could ask her to take her place. We could do something fun, huh? It's so beautiful here. I might even stay here. Why? Is that a good idea? Henry Johnson was coaxing me. Grab your Alex and go. There's always a job for someone as skilled as you. That's how Sarah Thompson's gonna let me go. And I don't like changing jobs. No, that's just a dream. But I'm sure I'll be coming here more often. All right, granddaughter, laughed Henry Johnson. We'll see. Oh, that's it. My lady's here. You take your walk, I'm gonna go get my shots. Love you, Grandpa. Take care. Love you too, baby. Emily was walking down Rubenstein toward Nevsky. There was almost no snow on the sidewalks in the center. The tall girl on high heels deftly rounded the passers-by she met. Suddenly she felt her foot twist. There was a cracking sound. They're at it again. Emily thought with horror as she looked down at her feet. The heel was dangling treacherously on a thin piece of sole. This is a must. So I've had no luck with heels lately. I've degenerated to sneakers. I went for a walk, you see. Emily stood and laughed. It was impossible to walk so resolutely. She was about to call a cab, but her phone was dead. The battery dead. Oh, shit. Emily cursed. Really came a voice from very close by. I don't believe it. A man was standing next to her, laughing. At first, Emily didn't recognize him and wanted to reproach the stranger for his rude behavior. But after a closer look, she realized that the guy who had helped her free her heel from the bars a few months ago was standing in front of her. Only this time he was dressed not in a work overalls, but in a very decent coat. Is that you? The girl exclaimed in surprise. It looks like me, the guy smiled back. I see you have such a hobby breaking heels. Don't make me laugh. Emily laughed. I feel awkward enough as it is. I don't know how to get home with a broken heel. I wanted to call a cab, but my phone died. Let me give you a ride. How far is it? Oh no, it's inconvenient. I'd appreciate it if you'd call me a cab. That'll be enough. What's the point? I have a car over there, the man waved somewhere to the side. I actually noticed you from it. Just as I was about to drive off, bang. I see this picture. I didn't even believe it was you. But it would have been hard not to recognize you. The look is too memorable. And that hair. It's quite ordinary. Emily blushed, even the hair is sparse. It's not often you see a young lady with such a mop of red hair without a hat. Aren't you afraid of getting cold? The weather here is deceptive. The wind is blowing. I'm hardened. Emily smiled. All right, I'll take it, I guess. But it's not far to Kanaya. I'm staying there. That's great. I'm going that way too. My name's Justin, by the way. And you're Emily? That's a cool name. My sister's Daria too. I'm here to see her, by the way. So you're not from around here? No, I think we're from around here. I'm on a little vacation. Once a year I come here to visit my sister. I let myself take a break from work. Why are we standing here? Let's get in the car. Emily took her new acquaintance under her arm and showed her, hopping on one foot. She thought to herself that it probably looked extremely comical from the outside. But it wasn't far to walk. After a couple of steps, Justin stopped and carefully opened the door of his car in front of Emily. The girl even whistled. The car was very expensive and shone beautifully with new paint and the lights of the garlands. Surprised, Justin laughed. Well, yes, such a car, mumbled Emily. When we first met you, you were wearing such a dirty overalls. I never would have thought that the person wearing it would be driving a car like that. It was Justin who was a little confused. At the time, I was on my way to get cigarettes from an apartment that was being remodeled, arrived in just a t-shirt. It was getting chilly. Well, I borrowed overalls from one of the workers. I'm surprised you remember me at all. I have the most ordinary appearance. Appearance, maybe an ordinary, but the smile. You can tell you're a good man, and did not pass by a girl in trouble. Raised that way. I agree that few people will stop now. They go here bending in their smartphones and prefer not to notice the world around them. Can you imagine how many people could be helped if they saw their grief in time? I've always been like that. I've always been like that. My sister's the same way. We're all human beings. We have to help each other, or there'll be nothing human left. Besides, I believe in karma. Today you help, tomorrow you'll be helped. Emily nodded logically. It's rare to meet someone like that these days. And we're here already. Well, it was nice to meet you, Justin. And I'm Emily, the young man smiled. And tell me, how long are you here for? I'm already leaving tomorrow morning. Why, have you been thinking for a while? Maybe I should take you out for coffee? You'll forgive me if I seem intrusive. I just don't believe in coincidence. We've met twice, and under the same circumstances. I mean, think about the odds of that happening. So I'd like to keep in touch. Okay, it's not fate, so yes. Don't feel bad, Emily smiled. We can see each other in our town. I work in a gallery. Do you know the model? He's an art man. You could put it that way. You're welcome to come. I'm there most days, except weekends. You can drop by at lunchtime. Let me leave my phone number. Are you interested in art too? You could say that Justin nodded. Only a different kind of art. I work in the IT field as an IT programmer. Surprised by the girl. Not exactly. Although that's what they call us in the commonplace. I prefer to be called an information systems engineer. Oh, I'm far from that. We're just now training our brainchild in culture. Are you an art historian? Not exactly, but great, Justine interrupted. I hope you won't refuse me a consultation too. If it would be within my power to do so, please do. Okay, it was nice to meet you. I'll be sure to call you when I get back. See you then, Emily smiled. At the airport, she even called Alex to arrange a meeting. Much to her surprise, her husband refused to come to pick her up. Amy, I'll be at work, he informed her. Take a cab. But we had an agreement. The wife was indignant. You're flying in at 12 noon? It's not like I can dash out of the office just to pick you up. What's the problem? Should I call a cab? Nothing, the girl said, frustrated. Just thought you might have missed me. I missed you, but I'm working. I'll see you tonight. Okay, Emily sighed. She made her own way home, where to her great relief she didn't catch her mother-in-law. Thank goodness she's not here, the girl thought. That's the last thing I want to do right now is listen to her lecturing. What is this? Emily noticed that there was a lipstick on her night table. It seemed like nothing out of the ordinary, but the tube was foreign. She removed the cap and looked at the bright red contents in bewilderment. Is this what Cynthia Lewis puts on her makeup like this? She pronounced. Haven't noticed her like that. 6 decades old and colors like that. It's odd. And why is it in our bedroom anyway? Emily quickly put the find out of her mind and started calling Sarah Thompson. Emily returned from her business trip, reported back, sent all her work files and arranged to come back the next day. She slept through the evening. Emily woke up when she heard Alex return. She immediately jumped out of bed and ran out to meet her husband. Alex stood in the doorway, disgruntled. Is something wrong? Emily asked worriedly. You're back. It's kind of strange, Alex answered. Where's Mom? I don't know. I arrived, she was gone. Call her. Get her location. I don't feel like it. I don't feel like it. It's probably for the best. What are you talking about? Emily's frowning. Look, we need to talk. And Mom would just be in the way right now. You're scaring me. Is it serious? Yes, Emily, it's serious. Oh my God, the girl's pale. What does Grandpa have to do with it? Alex answered irritably, you have a problem with him. Of course. He's the closest thing I have to a family member. And you're standing there like that. I'm thinking about the worst. I haven't even called him yet. Alex silently went to the kitchen and poured himself some water, drinking the whole glass. The man turned around and looked at his wife seriously. Next, he began. We have to break up. Emily's breath caught from surprise, and her legs felt weak. What do you mean, break up? In the most direct sense. I've fallen in love with someone else. Are you kidding me right now? It's not funny. Alex, I'm serious. Emily, I've wanted to tell you for a long time, but I've regretted it. And I wasn't sure how I felt before. Before? What do you mean before? How long have you been with her? 6 months. 6 months? Emily shrieked. But how is that possible? Alex, I don't believe you. It's not true. You're just kidding. I'm not joking, her husband snapped. Come on, you idiot. I'm telling you straight out that I don't love you anymore. I have another woman with whom I am happy, and she's expecting a child with me. Oh my God. Emily slid down the wall to the floor. Tears came to her eyes. You're just telling me this now? When else? I didn't think it was serious at first, but then I realized you and I were way out of our league. And she is this about the baby? Emily asked sadly, isn't it? So tell me. It's not just the baby that I found out about recently. I've been in love with her for a long time. You could say that the pregnancy was the final factor in my decision. I don't believe it, Emily sobbed openly. Tears were pouring down her face and salty streams into her mouth. Emily, everyone, calm down. I did everything I could. I swear, I didn't mean it that way. It just happened. It just happened, the girl laughed hysterically. It just happened? You cheated on me. You hid the affair. And now you're expecting a baby. Is that what you call it? You betrayed me, Alex, and I loved you. Tell me. Does Cynthia Lewis know about this? Is she the one who's been covering for you? Is that what you were doing when you were supposedly working late and going on vacation with your friends? So answer me. Don't get hysterical, Alex ordered. Yes, that's it. What else do you want me to say? So everything is clear. Mom only found out recently. Don't blame her. How do you like to do that? I told her when I found out Nikki was pregnant. Nikki. That's whose red lipstick is on my night table. What, did you sneak her into our bedroom already? Only once, and not in the bedroom. I put it there myself. She dropped it by accident. I thought it was yours. I just brought her over to meet my mom. You're crazy. Bringing your mistress here to our house, taking advantage of my absence. Emily, don't overreact, Alex snapped at her. This isn't our house. It's Mom's apartment. I get it, Emily laughed, getting up from the floor. Mom's apartment. So that's why you've been dragging your feet about moving in. You had it all planned out and were just waiting for the right time. And that witch. She knew everything from the start. Don't try to change my mind. I imagine her eyes lit up when she heard that Nikki was pregnant. Your mother's obsessed with grandchildren. She hated me when she found out I couldn't have kids. I know all that, and I only kept my mouth shut out of respect for you. You shouldn't have. It should have been over a long time ago. What do you want from me? I'm a young, healthy man. I want to be a father. Can't you give me that? It's not too late to break up as friends. You have your whole life ahead of you. You're beautiful, interesting, smart. Have your own life, but without me. I swear there are plenty of men out there who don't want kids for nothing. You're an idiot, Emily said. A star. Friends, you say? After such a betrayal, I don't want to know you. And you're telling me about friendship? It's over. I'll pack my things and leave tomorrow. Don't even try to come after me and apologize. Emily ran out of the kitchen and locked herself in her bedroom. She sobbed into her pillow at night. It's over, she thought. How could he do this to me? Is it my fault I can't have children? He swore that none of this mattered to him. And you were all over him, Mommy. I bet she's probably glowing with joy, realizing she got rid of me. I can live with Nikki and them. I can live on my own. The next day, Emily excused herself from work after lunch, telling Sarah Thompson that she needed to take care of some household chores. There was no time to delay. No reconciliation with Alex was out of the question, especially after his confession that his mistress was pregnant. Emily would surely forgive the treason itself. All the more her husband had confessed to it. But it was a real betrayal. Since childhood, her grandfather taught her that you can forgive anyone, except the traitor and hypocrites. Having cheated once, each of them could easily commit a second offense. Emily even felt lighter when she thought it over in the morning. Living under the same roof with a traitorous husband and a tyrant mother-in-law was unbearable. And here she was getting rid of two problems at once. When Emily tried to open the apartment with her own key, she found it didn't fit. The locks had even been changed, she thought gloatingly. It's okay if they don't open it. I'll call the police. After all, I have every right to take my things. She pressed the bell with all her might. The door was not open for a long time. At last there were sounds, clicks. Cynthia Lewis appeared on the threshold and grinned.
We thought you'd gone all the way out. Let me go. I've got things to pack. Emily gritted her teeth.
The mother-in-law obediently moved away, letting the girl inside. To Emily's surprise, she spotted a pair of high-heeled boots in the hallway. We have company, her mother-in-law grinned. Not us, girl Cynthia pursed her lips. You don't live here anymore, remember. It's not much use. Emily walked into the room. A girl a little younger than her was sitting on the couch. Alex stood with his back turned to the window. Hello, Emily said, raising her tone defiantly. You must be Nikki? Amy, Alex interrupted. Don't do that. Get your stuff and go. I'm smiling, Emily said. I won't interrupt you, mind your own business. Emily walked out and headed for the bedroom. She took a large bag out of the closet and began to put things in it. Cynthia Lewis, accompanied by Nikki, suddenly appeared on the doorstep. Both were watching the girl's actions intently. Can I help you? Emily asked wryly. Or are you just standing there, amusing yourself with the spectacle? You, Nikki, stay here and make sure this girl doesn't take anything extra, her mother-in-law smirked. I'll go and get her things from the bathroom. Okay, Aunt Cynthia, Alex's mistress said. I just don't know what she's allowed to take and what she's not. Cynthia chuckled to herself. It seemed that these two had known each other for a long time and were already working together. Fuck them. Emily said dryly out loud. I'll only take what's mine. I don't want anything that doesn't belong to me. If you're worried about the jewelry Alex gave me, it's in the jewelry box on the table. Eat all 2 nicknames. And this one too. Emily pulled the wedding ring off her finger and tossed it toward the woman. It clinked and rolled to the side. She threw clothes and makeup into her bag and reached for a beautiful chest. Hey, Nikki rudely called out to her. What's that? None of your business. It's my parents' stuff, Emily snapped at her. Don't you ever try to get your hands on it. You'll be ripped out without even blinking. Nikki, horrified by the threat, stumbled back to Cynthia Lewis, who was carrying a bag full of something. She's threatening me, Aunt Cynthia cried the girl. How dare you? The mother-in-law lashed out at Emily. Emily shoved her aside, snatched the package from her hands, and headed for the exit. On her way out, she glanced into the living room, where Alex was still staring out the window. "Goodbye," Emily told him dryly, and left the apartment for good. Her husband didn't even look back at her. Emily stood in the driveway, waiting for a cab. She looked at her bags with disdain, realizing that the last 4.5 years of her life had fit so easily into them. She hadn't said anything to her grandfather yet. She didn't want to worry him prematurely. The car pulled up and the driver helped load the bags into the trunk. Emily was already at Grandpa's house in 15 minutes, ringing the doorbell. She stood there in utter confusion. She didn't want to burden Henry with her problems. The old man might have a heart attack. The nurse opened the door. "Oh, hello," Emily mumbled. "Where's Grandpa?" "Hello, Emily," the woman nodded. "Henry Johnson was sick this morning, but he's fine now. He called me, and I called an ambulance right away." Emily turned pale, and the woman hurried to reassure her. "Don't worry, it was just a sudden drop in blood pressure. It's all fixed now. He's resting at his place." "Thank God," Emily exhaled and went into the apartment. The nurse looked at her bags in surprise, but didn't ask any questions. Emily dropped her burden and immediately rushed into her grandfather's bedroom. Henry Johnson was half lying there, reading a book. He grumbled indignantly when he heard the door open. "Marina, I told you not to disturb me." "Grandfather, it's me," Emily sobbed. Oh, Henry was surprised. "Emily, how are you here?" "I told Marina not to call you, not to distract you from your work." She didn't call. Emily reassured him. "You can't be stressed out right now. I'm here myself, but it's still 4:30. Did you get off work early? I missed my grandfather and Peter. How was your trip?" "It was fine," Grandpa. Emily smiled. "But you can't fool me. I can see your eyes are crying. Come on, tell me. I could never fool you." "Where?" "I'm coming to see you for good," the girl confessed.
What do you mean? Henry was surprised and raised himself on the pillows.
"Stay down and don't get up." Emily stopped him. "We broke up with Alex. If you don't mind, I'll stay with you for a while." "Wait, no, of course I don't mind. How could you even think that? It's your house too. But what do you mean we broke up? Are you fighting about that witch again?" "No," Grandfather. Emily took a deep breath and told Henry everything. The old man listened silently, stroking her hair. "I want to get back at him so badly. I'm so angry," Emily summarized. "Revenge is a useless thing," said her grandfather. "His deed will definitely boomerang back on him. You'll see. The best thing you can do is to forget all this. My girl, you're strong. You'll get through this. And I won't leave you. And let these people live their lives as they please. You're too good for this family. It's a despicable thing to do to a man like you. That doesn't speak well for them. Thank God it's all coming out now. Alex may be a scoundrel, but it was good of him to come clean. Now you have to file for divorce." Emily raised one eyebrow. "Why wait? I get your point. You're not going back, even if he crawls back on his knees. And there's no point in him getting ready to be a father now, and his mom won't let him. Forget it, girl. You're young, beautiful, and wonderful. You'll meet your love again." "Grandpa, what if I don't? I can't have children." Alex said it wasn't important to him at first. But look, he changed his mind as soon as there were more interesting prospects on the horizon. Emily took a serious look at Henry Johnson. "Listen to me. Believe me, children are the greatest happiness. But if God didn't give them to you, then you're destined for a more important mission. And if that's the case, there will be someone to share your joys and sorrows. The most important thing is not to despair. Did you bring your things?" The girl nodded. "Yes, I left it in the hallway. It's funny that there are only 2 bags. Can you imagine? Those guys were still standing there to make sure I didn't steal anything. Imagine I would have left everything but my mom's jewelry box. But I don't have time to go shopping right now. It's New Year's Eve. By the way, yes?" Grandpa shook his finger. "Let's go shopping for a Christmas tree one of these days. We'll put a big one up to the ceiling in the living room, like we used to, remember?" "Of course I remember, Grandpa." How could anyone forget our Christmas trees? Emily smiled. Did you still have the old toys? You couldn't throw them away, could you? Are you crazy? Throw them away, you say. It's all plastic and stamped toys on Christmas trees nowadays. We have real antiques. Even the hair my parents used to put on the tree when I was a kid. No, honey. Everything's safe and sound. When's your day off? I have to work tomorrow and the day after that, and then we're all off for the holidays. And after January 5th, I'm going on vacation. So we'll spend a lot of time together. Alex and I were going away. But you see how things turned out. One thing's for sure, I'm not going anywhere. So at least I'll spend the holidays with you. I'll recover, have a good rest, without the constant nervousness. And after the vacation, I think I'll file divorce papers so I don't have to wait. Well, go unpack. Your room's always waiting for you. I haven't even touched anything in there. I just call the cleaning service every once in a while to clean it up. You get a good night's rest and everything will be fine. I love you so much, Grandpa. Emily gave the old man a big hug.
I love you too, granddaughter.
On her last day at work, Emily quickly finished all her work. She was already looking forward to the weekend and vacation. Sarah Thompson was very pleased with the results of her work. So without a shadow of a doubt, she let her ward go on a long vacation. Emily, the gallery owner, came into the office. Have you finished all the catalogs? Of course, Sarah. Emily responded, looking out from behind her computer. All that's left to do is check the catalogs for the vaults, and everything's perfect. I'll leave you to it. I'm going to run some errands. You then give the girls everything and you can rest easy. To congratulate Grandpa on the upcoming holidays, of course. Sarah smiled. Emily spent another hour with the paperwork. Having finished her work, she got ready to drink coffee. Suddenly there was a knock at the office. Come in, Emily shouted. Emily shyly looked at one of the gallery workers. There is someone to see you. A man. He said he was Justin. Justin? The girl thought. Oh yes, Justin, that's right. Tell him I'll be right there. Wow, that's unexpected. Why didn't he even call? Emily thought. Okay, I'll find out. I'm so glad I got this done. At least we can have a normal conversation. I'll just have coffee with him and invite him to my favorite coffee shop. Emily threw on her fur coat and dashed out of the office. As she walked down the stairs, she caught herself thinking that she was very pleased with Justin's visit. She liked the guy for his directness and sincerity. He was standing near the large mirror downstairs, scrutinizing one of the gallery brochures. Justin. Emily waved her hand at him. Justin looked away and smiled broadly. What about you? No call. I must have gotten the number wrong, he shrugged. I called, and there was some angry man. Good thing you told me where you work. And I caught you. Honestly, it was just luck. Even though I work around here. Even if I'd left with nothing, it wouldn't have been such a shame. Yeah, you're just in time, Emily said, smiling. I was just finishing up my business, and I was about to have coffee, and you were going to keep me company. I'd love to. Justin nodded. Then I have one request. Emily squinted at him. Anything you want. Let's not talk about work today. I have a vacation ahead of me, and frankly, I'm so very tired. That's no problem at all. And I have to work until the holidays. Then I have a week's vacation, and then I'm back in action. I just got back from vacation yesterday, and I'm right back at your place. Emily and Justin sat down in a cozy cafe and ordered drinks and desserts. It's frosty today, the guy came up to her arm. It's a stark contrast to Miami. It's a mild European winter there, not like us. It's all right. On the contrary, I like it. I love winter, the girl replied. Emily, I've noticed something different about you. You look different, kind of sad. Are you all right? You don't have to answer that. It's an inappropriate question, considering we're almost strangers. But what if there's something I can help you with? No, I'm fine, Emily smiled, but something in her smile betrayed a lie. Justin noticed it. Well, if you don't want to, don't tell me, he nodded. You know, the girl decided, I'll tell you. It is believed that it is sometimes useful to speak out, especially to a stranger, so that there was no prejudice to the situation. In general, a couple of days ago I packed my things and left my husband. Or rather, he kicked me out. Almost 5 years of marriage. He said he had another woman he loved and she was expecting a child with him. Well, I did not argue, quite calmly reacted and just left. Now I live with my grandfather. And you know, I even feel better in some ways. That's the way it is. Wow. Justin shook his head and looked at Emily. And you say it all so calmly. Women are usually hysterical in these situations. It wasn't all smooth sailing. I was living in an illusion. I just turned a blind eye to a lot of things. And when I left, I saw everything from the outside, and I suffered from my mother-in-law. My grandfather says everything's for the best, but I can hardly believe it. I don't know. I think I should rest now, spend more time with my grandfather. He's in a bad way. Heart failure. His blood pressure dropped a lot recently. He's a very good man. My grandfather's the only one I have. I lost my parents 10 years ago. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't know, Justin said. That's okay. It was a long time ago. My grandfather basically raised me. He's an antiques dealer, and he instilled in me a taste for art. He lives all alone, with only a nurse to take care of him. Yes, Emily said. But it's good that he has you. There are so many lonely old people nowadays with no one to help them. No, I will never leave my grandfather, said Emily confidently. Tomorrow we'll go Christmas tree shopping with him. It's probably not very convenient to take a cab, but let me give you a ride, Justin suggested. It's my day off tomorrow, too, and I don't have much to do. It would be my pleasure. Besides, it's always nice to meet an interesting person. And your grandfather seems to be one of them, doesn't he? Oh yeah, Grandpa's a real piece of work. He always has 1,000 stories to tell. Am I boring you? Not at all, said the man. I'm easy to get along with people. I like to talk. Apparently the interlocutors feel it and willingly reach out to me. That's right. Emily laughed. I don't know you at all, and it feels like I've known you for 100 years. I couldn't even talk so freely with my husband, but I still don't feel comfortable asking you to come with us to get the tree. Where's it going? In the cabin. On the roof, only if you mess up the car. We usually get a huge tree. Don't you worry about that at all? I'm just trying to reassure Emily's boyfriend. I have a pickup truck. I can fit a Christmas tree in the back of it. Okay, Emily sighed. That's a deal. But I have a question. Go ahead. Are you sure this won't hurt your plans? You probably have a family, Justin. I'd rather spend time with them than with a woman I don't know and her grandfather. I don't have any family. I mean, I have my parents and my sister, but they live in other cities. My parents went south about 5 years ago, my sister to New York. I'm all alone out here. No girlfriend? Emily asked disappointedly, trying not to betray her feelings. Justin almost smiled. The cat is worse than any girl. She's very jealous and demanding. But I love her like that. I can't help it. Oh, a cat. Emily laughed, and I was already thinking. And what? Did you have to get married? Upset? You bet I was. Emily blushed. Why would you be? I don't know, he winked at her. You'll forgive me for being frank, but I think you really like me. I'm good at sensing these things. Emily turned red and looked down at him. No, Emily, no, you don't have to be embarrassed about it. I like you very much, too. From the very first time I met you, I was so sorry I didn't ask for your number, even though you wouldn't have given it to me. Married after all? I'm still married, Emily replied quietly. Considering how mean your husband was to you, you can't call it a marriage. Tell me you're not going to file for divorce. I will, Emily exhaled. Grandpa's in a hurry too, but I want to recover first. I'll do it after vacation. I can set you up with a very good lawyer. No, I don't think you'll need one. We have no property in common, no children. Why no children? Justin frowned. No, I'm sorry to be tactless, but in this situation it's a good thing we don't have any. It's just that there's a baby fever now. People have a baby almost immediately after marriage. You seem like a well-off girl. I'm sure your husband doesn't need either. Now that we're being honest with you, I'll tell it like it is. I can't have children. We wanted to have kids, but it didn't work out. Alex accepted it, but as soon as his mistress got pregnant, he ran away from me. My grandfather says that if fate has ordered it so, we should look for happiness in another direction. He's absolutely right. The main thing now is to find yourself. Once this happens, everything is within my reach, and a child can always be adopted. You can love it no less than your own. What if he's hereditary? You don't give up children for a good life. That's true. But I believe that upbringing and love are crucial. And heredity is something that can be changed. I wonder if I should go. I was very happy to talk to you, but my grandfather was waiting for me. I'll come tomorrow. Just tell me where and when. Can I give you a ride, by the way? I wouldn't mind, Emily answered playfully. Let's make it closer to 3 then. But we have to be there by 6. Grandpa's got homework at school. She didn't even notice how the holidays flew by. She'd grown close to Justin during that time. They went out a lot, talked a lot. At Christmas, her grandfather even invited the guy to visit. He liked Justin very much. Emily, her grandfather, asked her cheerfully as she did her makeup to get ready for the visit. Guest, because this guy is really good. He likes you, I can tell. And your eyes light up at the sight of him. Don't make it up, pouted her granddaughter. We're just friends. It's rare to meet such an interesting and kind person. Tell me they're still friends. Maybe it's true, but I'm not fooled. There's a spark between you two. Why don't you go ahead and get a divorce? I have a feeling Justin's going to propose to you soon. Where are you? We've only known each other a couple weeks. Justin took a good look at Emily. What kind of proposal? And he's a confirmed bachelor. A man is convinced that he doesn't need anyone until he meets a woman he's crazy about. And Justin, by all accounts, has met her. I proposed to my grandmother a month after I met her, he said. I didn't see any reason to wait. We liked each other. We had fun together. The love was such that I couldn't look at anyone else after she died. Grandfather, Emily said, indignantly, things were different in your day. Now we have to live together, get used to each other, understand each other. Without making stuff up. Lana, were you and Alex nagging? We were. What's the point? Everything's the same all the time. It's just the scenery changes. If people really love each other, they don't need to test their feelings. You'll feel it in your heart. You can't go wrong. You think so? Emily frowned. This is where it's supposed to shrink. Henry Johnson tapped his chest. I can feel it. Emily didn't have time to finish her sentence. Henry turned pale and started to fall. Grandpa. Emily cried out, frightened. What's wrong? Where are the pills? Henry slowly slid to the floor. Emily barely had time to pick him up. She dialed the ambulance and then called Justin. Justin, get over here as soon as you can. Grandpa's sick. He's all white. Did you call an ambulance? Just wait, don't worry, I'm right here. I'll be there in about 10 minutes. Emily frantically rubbed her grandfather's palms together. She found the pills in his breast pocket and put a couple under his tongue, as he usually did. It's all right, granddaughter, she murmured faintly. You're going to be all right. Henry fell silent and closed his eyes. The girl sobbed, clutching his hands. When the ambulance arrived, there was nothing that could be done. The paramedic registered the time of death. At the same moment, Justin walked into the apartment, realizing that something terrible had happened. He saw Emily sobbing, trying to push the doctors away from her grandfather, and took her into another room. Emily, he patted her cheeks. Just calm down. Now sit here. I'll do everything. At the funeral, Emily could hardly stand on her feet. Some people came up to her one by one to express their condolences, but she answered machine-like, not recognizing anyone around her. Only Justin's warm palm, clutching her own, somehow connected Emily to reality. Henry was buried in the same grave where his daughter and son-in-law had lain for 20 years. For a long time, Emily had been out of sorts, but Justin wasn't about to give her into the clutches of apathy so easily. Remembering her stories, the man almost immediately began taking her to the racetrack. The fresh, frosty air soaked with horse manure, the morning, the smells, and the horses quickly brought the girl to her senses. She even began to smile. The vacation was coming to an end, but Sarah Thompson, seeing how worried her assistant was in no hurry. She told Emily to come back when she felt better. Justin never left the girl's side. He was always telling her stories, cooking her meals. He practically moved into the apartment with her. Emily didn't mind. The guy even brought his cat. Usually reserved with strangers, British cat named Margot immediately fell in love with Emily. She slept at her feet, constantly asking for hands, which caused surprise of the owner. Wow, Justin laughed. This madam usually recognizes no one but me. Emily, what's your secret? I don't know, she shrugged, looking at the fluffy, black satin fur. I've never even had a cat. Only a parrot, apparently, feels my grief. By the way, cats are sensitive, Justin nodded. And I see your companionship is doing you good. You make a couple of sandwiches for yourself when you go to feed her. I noticed. Look, your cheeks are even bigger. So Margot, keep up the good work. We've got to get back on the road to life. The cat, as if understanding, began to purr louder than eagles and hypnotized Emily with her huge green eyes. Gradually, things got better. Emily went to work. The hectic activity was a good distraction from Justin's negative thoughts. She felt completely safe. This man was tapping into her soul, something that had previously been dormant, and soon Emily realized that she loved him for real. He finally came to live with her, as Emily refused to move in with him. Every little thing in the apartment was precious to her, and she couldn't let her grandfather's memory get dusty or worse, trampled on by the tenants or the new owners. It was 6 months later when Emily filed for divorce. She'd forgotten all about Alex, who hadn't even tried to remind her, but had to address the issue as Justin just walked up to her one morning. When the girl was making coffee, got down on one knee and handed her the ring. Emily couldn't believe her eyes. Of course she agreed, because now she couldn't imagine a day of her life without Justin. But the formalities had to be settled. At the same time, the girl entered the rights of inheritance. When the notary announced the will, the hairs on Emily's head stood up. She had no idea that her grandfather owned such a huge fortune. The will left her both apartments, the entire collection of valuables, and an astronomical amount of money from the bank account. It turned out that Henry had been saving money all his life, spending almost nothing on himself. In total shock, Emily walked out of the notary's office. Her fiancé was waiting for her in the car. Well? He smiled at the bride. I don't even know how to say it. Of course, I knew that my grandfather was quite a rich man, but to be so. Look at this. She handed the guy a folder, and I am now, it turns out, an enviable bride. Wow, the boy whistled, examining the papers. And what do you plan to do with such a fortune? I don't know, Emily shook her head. I don't need anything but an apartment, my grandfather's collection. I don't need that much. I could have enough for my grandchildren. I can't even have children. Don't rush things. Remember that you can always adopt a baby? I can't raise someone else's child, just. Emily sighed. I've thought about it, but then we could do something charitable. I think Henry Johnson would be very proud of you and would be glad that his capital would go to a good cause. Well, yes, Emily thought. Only I don't know anything about it. Oh, Emily, if you want to, you'll figure it out. It's not hard. That's true, too. 3 days later, the doorbell rang in the apartment. Emily was alone. Justin had left on business. That's strange, the girl thought. I'm not expecting anyone. I wonder who's there. She went to the door and looked through the peephole. Almost immediately, Emily recoiled, realizing who was standing on the other side. What do you want? She said in a chilling voice. Emily, please open the door. We need to talk, Alex answered. We have nothing to talk about, Emily grinned. The papers are filed. Divorce. I'll see you in court in a month. Emily, shouted her husband. This is very important. We won't take up much of your time. Emily thought she didn't want to see her husband and mother-in-law at all. She had no idea what they wanted to talk about, but she decided to open the door. Well, she began invitingly. What's so important? Aren't you going to let us in? Cynthia Lewis asked. No, I don't think so. Say what you want to say and go. Why are you so quick to chase us away? We're not strangers, after all, said Alex. You're wrong, dear, laughed the girl. We are strangers. Why did you come here? Emily, Alex began, eyes downcast, and we wanted to apologize. Yes, to apologize, repeated the mother-in-law. For what? Emily was surprised. We have all our issues resolved. There's nothing to talk about. It's over and done with. Emily, you don't understand. I want you to come back to me. What, the girl opened her mouth in surprise. What do you want me to do? You didn't get anything mixed up, did you? After what happened, what about your Nikki? I realized that I love only you. Emily Alex reached out to her. Nikki was a mistake. I've rethought everything. I can't live without you. Please, I'm sorry. What about the baby? Emily faltered. That witch got another witch pregnant. Love interfered. She's been playing Alex for a fool. You know, you have to be like that. When the baby was born, I thought it was weird that he looked nothing like Alex. So I insisted on a genetic test. The paternity test was the eye-opener. Turns out Alex couldn't possibly have kids. And I kept blaming you. I'm sorry, Emily. Oh, that's it. Oh, okay, what does this have to do with me? Well, Alex was confused. And I realized how stupid I've been. I don't know how to make it up to you, but I'd do anything. We also heard that Henry Johnson passed away 6 months ago. Sorry it's late, but we're sorry for your loss. The mother-in-law spoke in a sugary sweet voice. It even seemed odd to be so involved. Her grandfather had never liked her mother-in-law, and Alex didn't like him much either. They constantly asked Emily to take money from him, but the girl did not even think about it. And then it hit her. It's a very strange coincidence that you're here right now. Grandfather's death had been known for a long time. He was a well-known man in town. You must have heard about it, but you've only come now. You could have at least called 6 months ago. Sly, with a squint. But I also know something else. The notary who read my grandfather's will to me is a good friend of yours. A family friend, you might say. I didn't realize. I bet he called you right away and told you that I had become the owner of a huge fortune. Isn't that right? Don't play games. I can see right through you. Are you mistaken? Cynthia was indignant. I can see in your eyes that I'm not mistaken. All of you, get out of here and forget about it. I have a new life now. You can live yours however you want. And Alex, don't make up any of this stuff. The inheritance is not our property, even though I received it while I was still married. That's the law. Now goodbye. Emily slammed the door shut with a bang. Her heart was pounding desperately. But the girl felt unusually relieved, and immediately a warm wave began to rise in her stomach. Emily didn't immediately realize she was nauseous, and she barely made it to the bathroom in time. What is it? Nervous from excitement, she thought. Their health has been blown away. They'll know how to hurt others. Grandfather was right. Their betrayal has boomeranged back on them. Who'd have thought it? They had the nerve to show up. I'm shocked at these people. Thank God the divorce won't take long, just a month. And freedom. Emily began to vomit again. This time the girl was terrified. This had never happened to her before. In addition, her breasts were hurting badly. The thoughts in her head raced through at breakneck speed. Alex can't have children. Even Cynthia Lewis was guilty of treating me like that, thinking I was infertile. Of a woman's days, I haven't had one in a long time. I thought it was all the nerves. And now I'm nauseous. What if? Emily dressed quickly, threw on her jacket, and ran outside. She rushed to the nearest drugstore and bought what she needed, then took a pregnancy test at home. The minutes of waiting dragged on endlessly. Finally, the test showed the result. First one bright pink line, followed by another, a little paler. Emily took the test with trembling hands and stared at it for a long time. Really, she said aloud. It's a mistake. But in her heart, she knew there was no mistake. All these years she had lived in the certainty that she could not have children. And the reason, it turns out, was not her. It was the doctors. They all said there was nothing to be done. And analyzers in front of her face waved that the probability of conception is 0. It was a lie, a terrible misunderstanding, a ridiculous mistake. No one had even bothered to check that something was wrong with Alex. Emily frantically grabbed the phone. Her hands were shaking and wouldn't listen. She calmed down and wanted to dial Justin, but changed her mind. She turned on the camera, took a picture of the test, and just sent it to her favorite person. She didn't wait for a response. She already knew everything would be fine.
Olivia knew she was gonna die here. When? It was only a matter of time, but judging by the coughing that shook her frail, weakened body and the tingling in her sternum at her heart, her time would come soon. With unruly fingers, the old woman grasped the edge of the shabby blanket and pulled it higher. It was a futile effort. She couldn't get warm anyway. There were too many gaps in the walls. The January blizzard raged outside the barracks. Olivia opened her eyes, and the darkness beneath her eyelids was replaced by an almost equally all-encompassing darkness indoors. Something rustled in the distance and close at the same time. Before, when this barracks had been a residential and even a welcome home for working people on one of the city's outlying streets, mice would have rustled like that, as if someone were breaking down a damaged harpsichord. But there were no mice here now, because there was simply nothing for them to eat. And it was the old house itself that made the noise, the wooden rafters, walls, and ceilings that seemed to be suffering from the cold winter, from the fact that no one was taking care of them, that no one needed them anymore. The old bed was hard, and the pain in her back seemed to keep her awake, even if merciful sleep came to Olivia. But there was no strength to turn over. The old woman could no longer remember how long she'd been here. 3 days? A week? When it was still day, she got up, drank a little water, and ate the rest of the cookies. One was in a red paper wrapper labeled strawberry. Then she lay down. I thought she would lie down for a while and go to her, so to speak, work. But I overslept, old girl. Olivia gently sucked in air as she didn't swallow it greedily. She could delay a new coughing fit, but much more than the cold and hunger. She was tormented by her memories. Why doesn't a human being, such a strong creature, the pinnacle of evolution, have the ability to turn off memory at will, to razz, and like a switch turned, and no more tormenting, no more twisting of the soul what was gone forever, no more questions about whether you could have changed anything, prevented it? Memories came, bright, tenacious, juicy, merciless. Mom, am I really going to be happy? That day, her only child, her daughter Maria, was getting married. Olivia looked at the statuesque beauty and could not believe that this day had come, that her Maria today will become a wife. She will begin her own special, quiet adult life. Really, Olivia smiled hastily, furtively brushed away her tears, and began to correct the veil that covered the bride's head and shoulders with a puffy cloud. Maria was a late child. Olivia had become a mother at 41. The doctors had been ruthless. They had assured her that such an old pregnancy would be problematic, but the woman had felt as good as ever for 9 months. It seemed to her that thanks to this baby, she had the strength to live on, to meet each day with hope for the best. And after all, it was not easy. With her husband, Hillary, they lived soul to soul for more than 20 years. They were like barely fledged chicks, hurriedly left their parents' nests and rushed into the big life, as if someone promised them that everything would be great. Even their friends didn't believe that it would last, saying that it was just not love forever, but the craziness of young student life, which, however, already crossed all boundaries, because Maria and Hillary behaved like crazy a little bit. To couples on a hand-in-hand, literally walked in everywhere together. Soon they were nicknamed inseparable parrots. But the lovers did not take offense, and in general, they were not interested in anyone and anything but each other. Then they finished studying. He decided to become a designer and create cars. She decided to be a teacher of French. They, by the way, were unlike each other in many ways. Maria loved fruits and greens, dancing was a lark, and also an exceptionally non-conflicted person. And even if you had to ask in the store to add or subtract, say, cheese, it was given to her with difficulty, and more often she obediently bought what they gave. Hillary was an owl, recognized only meat, bread, and francons as food, hated to dance, because he considered himself awkward and was not averse to even fight for a strange company, if it seemed that they were fighting for a fair and just cause. They were opposites, and at the same time they complemented each other perfectly. The newly formed cell of society first lived in a dormitory, then in a service apartment, which was given to Hillary. Years passed. They were still as happy together, except that there were no children. Doctors were throwing up their hands and saying that, theoretically, both spouses do not have pathologies, but just, that's how cruel nature has disposed. There is such incompatibility in exceptional cases. If they had divorced, each of the couple would have been able to create a family where children would have been born, but they decided to stay together. And as if the universe had mercy on those whose love withstood such a test, when they had long ago stopped hoping, Olivia realized that she was pregnant. She did not know how to tell her husband about it, and decided to postpone this news until the vacation. The couple were going to spend it in a southern vacation home, which was famous for its mineral waters. But life was overturned by misfortune. Hillary died, suddenly and ridiculously. Just from the roof fell a piece of stucco. When Olivia was informed about it, she only cried out and collapsed without feelings. She woke up in the hospital, bedridden. The doctor explained that she'd been like that for several days, and it was an involuntary measure because she'd fall into a strange, deep sleep, and then she'd wake up, but she'd start screaming and want to run. The doctor took Olivia's hand and looked into her eyes. "You have to do this, for the baby's sake. It depends on you." And then after a moment's hesitation, he added, "Your husband would want you both to be healthy and happy." Olivia left the hospital and went back to her apartment. She began to pack. "I should have gone south. She doesn't have a heart," hissed an old neighbor sitting on a bench in the company of similarly elderly friends when Olivia left the house with a suitcase in her hand and got into a cab. She had barely had time to bury her husband, and already she was on vacation. Oh, and did you see that? The flowered dress. But Olivia, even if she had heard it, wouldn't have cared. She just thought it was the right thing to do and that Hillary would approve of her vacation. And the fact that an unborn child could benefit from fresh sea air, sunshine, and fresh fruit. Relatives. Hillary's own parents and family, the young woman, by the way, did not disapprove. Maybe they thought something like that, but they kept silent, and they supported her before the birth and then when her daughter was born. It was decided to name her after a very distant relative who lived even in the days of serfdom. That Maria was an actress in the theater of a certain baron, who for love of her even divorced his wife. He'd said he owned his own business. No, not even that. He bragged about it, saying he doesn't work for his uncle, but makes a lot of money himself. Olivia, of course, was interested in the details. It was not enough for her to be shown on the phone blurry photos of supposedly owned cars in a house, which were supposedly in a neighboring region, because Steve had supposedly lived there some time ago. And then he introduced his bride and future mother-in-law to his family, and a lot of curious details came to light. Apparently, not everyone in this family was ready to support the legend of Steve, and Olivia learned that no house and car he has the photo he downloaded from the internet. It also turned out that his business is the sale of biologically active supplements, which are very effective against many diseases. Many people were involved in this strange business, but in fact, as Olivia realized, the real profit was only those who stood at the top. Her mother had tried to warn her daughter about all of this. She said that it was all very strange, suspicious. Olivia said that she couldn't believe that this company Steve was working for even existed. There was a huge scandal, but Maria took her fiance's side. She forgave him the deception with the housing and the car, as well as the fact that he gave her earrings with fake diamonds. "I just wanted to impress you," Steve justified himself pathetically and even let out a tear. "A girl like you deserves the best. You could have chosen a millionaire sheik, but you chose me and I wanted to please you. But give me a chance and I'll really earn it all." Maria had had enough of this. She sternly and coldly told her mother not to even try to interfere with her happiness. Otherwise she might not come to the wedding. Olivia was faced with a cruel choice and decided that she would keep a good relationship with her daughter and there. Maybe she is just a selfish woman who is afraid of losing a child and should also believe that Steve will improve in time. But Olivia also timidly hoped that just in time, Maria would see what a bad man he was and file for divorce. And she, as a good mother, would be there for. But Olivia hardly noticed these oddities. All her thoughts, all her being, were absorbed in the new knowledge. The old woman wept when Mary, who was also overwhelmed with emotion, told her husband that she was expecting a child. He embraced his wife, patted her eyes, and then went to sleep. And went day after day. Time flew. Unlike her own, her daughter's pregnancy was hard, but doctors only waved their hands and said that apparently something in the body is wrong, but they cannot understand what it is. At the due date, the baby was born. It was a sturdy boy, and they decided to name him Tony, in honor of his great-great-grandfather. Olivia barely remembered the man. She'd seen him only a few times in the village in her early childhood, and his gray hair and beard didn't match his ceiling-high stature and mighty broad shoulders. Tony lived as a hermit in a forest hut. In the winter he hunted, And in the summer, he went out to the people for a short time, that is, he visited his relatives, looked after their farming in the collective farms, and helped them with advice and deeds, because Tony's health for the rest of his life was as good as his appearance. A great giant. Olivia believed with all her heart that now everything would get better, but it didn't. Steve still somehow held on during his wife's pregnancy, but then as if off the brakes. At home, he began to make scandals, yes, the kind that rarely any quarrelsome woman is capable of. He could disappear for a week and then come back, dirty, in torn clothes, smelly, drunk. Olivia finally talked to her daughter about the fact that it was all wrong, but Maria only cried and repeated that Steve has a difficult period in life and probably depression on the background of the first in his life paternal experience. And that's why he wants it to be bad not only for him, but for everyone around him. The old lady was honest in her opinion, but there was nothing else she could do, because there was still the last drop of hope that one day and very soon the grief-stricken father would come to his senses. Olivia also thought that if he destroyed her daughter's marriage, it would be difficult for her, a divorced woman with a child in her arms, to find her happiness as a woman again. And Olivia also noticed that Maria had somehow changed since she had told her about her pregnancy. It was as if she had lost her inner light, the very light that could give a person the will to live, help him to be happy. And Olivia was afraid that this light would never come back, and she didn't understand why it had disappeared. Steve's family, meanwhile, had no interest in his child. They congratulated him on the phone, and that was it. In fact, as Olivia realized, Steve and his family had had a final falling out, and they disowned him. And she was ashamed to be so angry in her thoughts, but she could understand. And then, when Maria passed the annual medical examination as she was used to, she was diagnosed with a terrible diagnosis, oncology, and in the final stage. Olivia was knocked off her feet, looking for money for treatment. She even stopped paying attention to Steve. He didn't matter at all now. And then it was over very quickly. Maria was gone. Did not help expensive drugs, for the sake of which Olivia emptied the bank account, where she had been saving all her life for a rainy day. Powerless was a psychic, which she turned to at the very end. Olivia begged her daughter to gather strength, to defeat the disease for the sake of not leaving her son an orphan. But all was useless. Maria was buried exactly 3 days before little Tony was to be 1 year and 2 months. The loss of her daughter, who had not lived to the age of 27, was for Olivia that fatal blow, which seemed to be layered on top of the loss of her husband. Life force left her. She was weakening, almost literally melting with each passing day. 3 months after the funeral of her daughter, Olivia was in the hospital. The doctor suspected a stroke. Then she was discharged, but the consequences remained. Sharply worsened mobility, back pain, spiking blood pressure. It was there, in the hospital, Olivia once came to Olivia's son-in-law. He brought some papers and said that they need to be signed urgently. Allegedly, it was somehow related to the inheritance, getting that share in the apartment, which belonged to Maria, because she, Olivia, in the early noughties rewrote half of it to her daughter, gave it as a gift. Olivia was crushed by grief. She was very lonely and scared. She signed everything. "What's this?" The old woman asked confusedly when she came back from the hospital and saw a bag in the hallway, in which her things were carelessly stacked. "Her things. I'm going to live in the apartment now, and I don't need an old woman in the subdivision," Steve said. Olivia felt like the room had run out of air. Her head buzzed and rumbled, and she swayed. "What are you hatching, old girl? You signed it all yourself." The son-in-law smirked. "So, it was about the inheritance. You said it was for the notary," said the old woman. "Well, it turns out so." The son-in-law got serious. "It's like a gift to me for the apartment was. And the other half of it, it means that I, as a husband from the deceased, will pass. I'm gonna sell it." "What?" Olivia was in a bad way, leaning against the jamb, blinking and squinting, but her eyes were still blurry. "We couldn't get along." Steve spread his hands and pretended to be sorry, but it came out as a horrible grin. "That means you'll go to a new apartment, Grandma. Your things are here, as you can see. I'm not a thief. I don't want anyone else's stuff. Come on, let's go." "Where to?" "I don't want to." "Who's asking you?" "Are you deaf?" This apartment is mine now. By law. It's fair. I gave it to you. But I'm not. Yeah, you're so smart. So, listen, old woman, he grabbed her by the shoulders so that her joints ached and shook Olivia. Nobody's gonna listen to you. Is that your signature? It's yours. It's legal. And if you say anything, I'll have you committed to the loony bin, you understand. The truth that she was no longer the mistress of her own house fell on Olivia hard, as if the cold, wet earth had crushed her, and she couldn't move her arms or shout for help. The only strength she had was to hold on to this reality somehow, and the fact that there was a baby sleeping in the far room gave her strength. Olivia was struck by lightning. Her eyes cleared, and she pressed her hands against Steve's chest, trying to move him aside. And my grandson, how could he be without me? Steve, don't push me. I'll babysit him. How can he be alone? How can he be alone without me, huh? He'll be all right, said his son-in-law, his expression as if he'd forgotten his own son's existence for a while. No, I don't need you here. Don't cry, grandmother. I'll find some girl. He wrinkled his face again in the semblance of a smile. To watch him. I'm a handsome groom now. There, what a house. And if, he shook the old woman again, if you go around here, whining to the neighbors, I'll get rid of the boy in no time. Oh, Steve, he's your son. Who knows, the man said. Do you think your Maria was quiet? Ha, she did things like that. No. You have a heart. Maybe I'll throw it in the garbage, shrugged his son-in-law. But if you, grandma, shut up and get out of the way, then maybe I won't touch him. Well, are you going to the new apartment? There was silence between them for a few minutes. Olivia lowered her head obediently. I'll go, but can I? Let me see my grandson, just once. No. He opened the door and forced her onto the landing. You'll start a howl, I know you. Soon Olivia was in the car at the driveway, her things stuffed in the trunk. Good afternoon. Steve was greeted by a neighbor who came up the driveway at the same time. Where are you going? I'm taking my grandmother to a sanatorium, answered Steve. She needs a change of scenery after the funeral. That's right, shook his head neighbor. A change of scenery is useful after life's upheavals. Have a good rest, Olivia. Keep strong. And he waved his hand, sincerely wishing her all the best. The car drove for a long time through the city. It seemed like an eternity to Olivia. Finally, it stopped. High-rises and even 5-story buildings were far behind a pile of some industrial enterprises, frowning giants hidden behind fences and gates. Olivia got out of the car and twisted her head in confusion. Where had he taken her? There were, without exaggeration, barracks all around, and such barracks that they should have been torn down a long time ago. In some places, there was light in the windows, but most of them were boarded up, covered with plywood or even just plastic bags. I got a house here, Steve explained, getting out of the car. Let's go, Grandma, for the housewarming party. Olivia gulped for air like a beach fish and felt just as helpless. Creak, creak, creak. They entered the damp-smelling entryway, and the son-in-law jingled his keys, unlocking the shaggy sodden door. A lone light bulb flickered on under the ceiling, illuminating the squalid dwelling, a tiny corridor, and a darkened room that could be seen through the open door ahead. Olivia listened to Steve as if through a drowsy dream when she was still floating in it, but already aware of what was going on in the world around her. He said that here was a room, a living room, a cubbyhole with a kitchen, a bathroom. You owe for the light, by the way, he said. You got to pay, old girl, or they'll cut off the electricity. The refrigerator doesn't work, by the way. The water leaks? Well, you old people don't need much, do you? You'll organize everything here somehow. You've seen the world revolution. He chuckled at his joke. So you must be used to this kind of life. Enough, you've had enough. Now, as they say, let the young go. Olivia realized only now that her son-in-law had taken something to amuse himself, and he was swaying. She realized that her son-in-law had obviously taken something to cheer him up. He was even swaying. Steve stepped out for a moment and returned, dragging all of Olivia's luggage. He dropped it all on the floor. Something jingled in the depths of the stuffed bag. She realized her son-in-law hadn't packed her things with love. He just raked up what was in her closet, but of course, he kept what he could still sell for a profit. kind of like he was taking care of his own personal gain. Olivia sighed and rubbed her wet eyes with her fingers, wiping them. She just couldn't understand. Why didn't he just throw her out on the street? Why does he pretend to care? That's not caring, no. Throwing out here. Does he have a shred of conscience and he muffles it like this? Or does he want to cover himself in front of people that he's not quite a murderer? He's not throwing his mother-in-law into the garbage. He's just taking her to another place of residence. That's it, old girl, live. Steve was already standing in the corridor, by the door. And watch me, he lowered his voice. If you're a fool, if you run to me or complain to anyone, I'll teach you a lesson. I'll teach you a lesson you'll regret. Do you understand? Yeah. Olivia's heart raced, cold sweat broke out. She had never been a thief before. She threw the sausage on the cash register and hurried away. There are so many beggars, she said angrily. Olivia shoved her hands in her pockets to keep warm. I'd lost my mittens somewhere. I couldn't find them. And then she pulled her right hand out of her pocket. There was a 50-ruble bill in it. There was still a little bit left after the payment for electricity. I just put the money in the wrong pocket, where I usually used to carry it. Here, I showed the same cashier the money. I'll pay. The painted girl hummed, pressed her lips together, but said nothing and punched in her purchases. A loaf of bread and processed cheese. Back in the barracks, Olivia took a drink of tap water and drank her lunch. She could hardly resist eating it all, so she left some cheese for dinner and a thick slice of bread for breakfast. And then the next day, Olivia called her son-in-law. The card. She knew he was smirking on the other end. No, I didn't lose it. But you're old. You could lose it. I have it. It's in my custody. Think about it. What do you need that much for? You have a grandson. No? Don't be afraid. When the pension comes, I'll take it off. Think of it as alimony from you for your grandson. But Olivia didn't know how to react to what was happening. Olivia sighed. So now, at least she would have hot tea. The next day, she went to the store again. Again, she stood up and held out her hand. It was shameful to admit it, but now the act of begging was easier. A couple of times, Olivia went inside and pretended to choose items from the shelves to warm herself up a little before returning to her work, as she mentally called it. By evening, it was clear that she had enough for such luxuries as a packet of tea and a bag of franca. But no matter how brave the old woman was, and very soon the meager ration made itself felt. The body settled in lightness, some airiness, but in the morning to get out of bed was getting harder and harder. And then there was a disaster. The house turned off the heating. How can we live now? Grandma Maria turned to the workers who were digging up the frozen ground not far from the barracks. Warm yourselves with clothes, turn on the heaters, answered the boy and stomped his feet. He was already freezing, and the work, which promised to drag on due to the old age of local constructions, was just beginning. I honestly don't know when we'll finish. Maybe tomorrow, or maybe a week from now. Olivia sighed and went back to her usual place, the store. But no sooner had she gotten up than that sales girl looked out. This isn't a bum shop. Get out. I was just. Get out. She raised her voice to a shout. I'm going to call the cops on you. What am I doing? Olivia shook her head, her shoulders shaking. I just. Go away. The guard stood behind the girl's shoulders. Or I'll put you in a snowdrift with your head down, and you'll sit there until spring. This guy looked just like his brother-in-law, and he even had the same ugly grin. Olivia walked and shuffled away. The snowfall was getting heavier. It seemed like a white shroud of snow, howling and whirling. Grandmother didn't understand where she had turned. It seemed that her house was over there. Home. Is this the place? This must be the last shelter. Olivia stopped and turned her nose. The overwhelming smell of muffins and coffee hit her. She walked toward the bakery, which stood alone where the courtyards of the 5-story buildings began. Lamps in old-fashioned green lampshades burned welcomingly outside the windows. There were even a few tables inside, and some of them were occupied by people. They were eating and drinking, warm and smiling. They were well-nourished, cozy, safe. The old woman swallowed her saliva. I wish I could eat a cake and drink sweet tea too. Only. Today, she couldn't ask for a penny of alms. And from yesterday, literally 1 ruble was in her pocket. For that, Olivia thought they wouldn't even let her have a crumb. Gathering the rest of her strength, both physical and mental. Olivia was about to go further, somewhere, but suddenly her foot slipped. Losing her balance, the old woman fell. But she was lucky. There was a snowball at the bottom, and as Olivia determined by her first sensations, she didn't break anything. But she had no strength to get up. The feet of passersby passed by, indifferent to other people's grief. "Help!" Olivia whispered weakly, and suddenly she was pulled up, gently lifted. The old woman gasped, blinked. The setting sun was shining from the back of the man who had come to help her, and it was hard to make out his face. "Are you all right? Does anything hurt?" the stranger asked. He was much taller than Grandma. She blinked some more. There was a cloud in the sun, curly and gray-white, the kind of cloud that promised there would be more snowfall and cold. Oh, how much more! And as the light shone less brightly, Olivia could see her savior. He was a young man, his eyes black, his hair as long as a raven's wing. He was wearing black jeans, a black sheepskin coat, in fact, black everything. Olivia noticed it, but she didn't have an opinion about it. She didn't care, and what did it matter if the man was nice and helpful? Confused, she answered that she was in one piece. "Did you come this way?" He pointed to the bakery. "The steps are slippery. Let me help you up." "No," Olivia shook her head. Then her lips trembled, and she mumbled through her tears that no, she shouldn't go there, she couldn't buy anything. Grandmother Maria was not accustomed to complain about her life, but now it was as if she had burst into tears. She was talking about the fact that she had been chased away from the place where she had asked. And was that a crime? "I'm sorry," she sobbed, finally gathering her strength. "Thank you for lifting me up." And she was about to leave. "Grandmother, let's go," suddenly said the stranger and resolutely dragged her into the bakery. "What? Why?" But, he said he just wanted to give her a treat. Why? Well, he just wanted to do it. As a gift. Just like that. Olivia was timid, but then, as they stood at the display case, she asked for a cake and cookies and tea. The stranger got himself a coffee and they just sat at a table. He didn't bother with conversation. He was looking out the window. Olivia, chewing diligently and sipping greedily from her cup, looked at him. Who was he? Dressed decently and even, if she understood anything else in this world, expensively. His hands aren't workman's. They seem soft, and his nails are neat. On one of his fingers is a large silver ring with a red stone. Finally, Olivia got up from the table. So did he. She wanted to thank him again, but before she could say a word, he returned to the counter. 2 large meat pies, 5 lingonberry buns, 3 loaves of bread, 5 cottons, a packet of coffee. Olivia looked at him, then at the bag of food in her hands. "No offense, Grandma, but I just think you'll need it." He smiled and took her hand and led her out of the bakery. The saleswoman behind the counter rounded her eyes. Such a spectacular man and such a thing. Not only did he bring some vagrant from the street, although maybe she was a relative, he bought her all sorts of things. It would have been better. The girl shook her head. It would have been better if he had asked her for her phone number. "Thank you. Oh, my dear, thank you. I don't know how to thank." Olivia was overwhelmed with feelings. A complete stranger, and such a thing. He bought her so much. She clung tightly to his hand as if without it she would have fallen again. "You're welcome, Grandmother." He smiled at her. "You have to do a good deed once in a while, don't you?" That's right. He nodded. "Well, good luck to you, Grandma. May everything go well for you." Delicately removing her hand from his arm, he walked away. He was glad that he had met this old woman and done a good deed. It was his long tradition to do some good deed before. He was a bit superstitious and believed that a good deed in the universe balanced what he had to do now. And there was much to be done, and perhaps, if circumstances demanded it, his task would bring much pain and suffering to one man. But heaven knows, the wretch deserves it. 2 weeks have passed since the stranger in black helped her. His generous gift of baked goods had helped the old woman feel full for 3 days. But then it had gotten worse again. On top of that, Olivia had a cold. Sometimes she tried to call her son-in-law, who answered the phone once. He listened to the old woman's pleas, said that he would come by the other day, and he didn't. Olivia was getting worse. She thought maybe she should at least go to her ex-neighbors, maybe call them and ask for help. But then she remembered Steve's terrible threats, and the old woman realized that she wasn't afraid for herself. She was afraid for her grandson. If only nothing bad had happened to him. And suddenly her son-in-law called. In a cheerful voice, said that the house now has a mistress and the boy, stepmother. He handed the phone to someone and Olivia recognized who it was by his voice. Then to be sure she clarified and even calmed down a little. It turned out to be the neighbor from the first floor, Veronica. Veronica was a divorced woman in her 30s who claimed that someone had put a celibacy ring on her. Veronica lived with her more fortunate married sister and had in the house of a close relative of the role of a kind of babysitter for her 5 children. So theoretically, Veronica had experience in dealing with babies. "How are you, Olivia?" Veronica asked. "Steve said you're at the sanitarium. How are you? Do you miss home?" Olivia could barely speak. She looked around the room. The workers had fixed the heating main, but then it broke again. And for the 4th day, the barracks was cold, and it looked as if the frost would soon cover everything inside with frost. Grandma Maria was not used to lying, but she couldn't tell the truth either, because she was a little afraid for herself. "Yes, I miss you, but I don't know when I'll be back." "Ah." Veronica stretched, and it seemed that she was even glad. "Steve said that you wanted to visit your relatives. Well, don't worry about a thing. Tony is a very good boy, just a perfect child." And the neighbor told how he eats, plays, babbles. Tears rolled from the old woman's eyes. When the conversation ended, she suddenly felt so good. She went to the kitchen and heated boiling water, drank it with cookies from the package of strawberry. She climbed under a pile of blankets. She had found all sorts of old ones in the storeroom of the same apartment and tried to sleep. It was impossible to get warm, but at least in a dream the cold didn't bother her so much. And if she was lucky, Olivia hoped that maybe she'd dream about her daughter. And if she was lucky, Hillary. "Oh, you?" And the father. Veronica was not a woman shy and large, so with men with whom she came together from time to time, in the hope of arranging her female happiness, she used to talk frankly and sometimes even spiced her speech with a strong word. "Why are you hatching?" "No, for the fact that the old lady sent to the sanatorium, thank you, as they call it. I know you men. If something goes wrong, it's your mother-in-law's fault, but you take care of her. But what did you turn the apartment into without her, huh? And if I wasn't here, it would be a pigsty, wouldn't it?" Steve didn't answer. He pretended to be absorbed in the soccer match on the screen. "Oh, you've taken my soul out," Veronica said. And then she was distracted by a phone call. It was her sister. It turned out that she had a night shift. Her husband was down with the flu, and the eldest daughter decided to spend the night at a friend's house. So it turned out that the remaining 4 children aged from 3 to 12 years old have no one to look after them. Theoretically, my sister could not go to the warehouse marketplace on the night shift, but they're paid at an increased rate. On the nose was the next payment on the loan. "I realized that you'd be lost without me." Veronica snorted and promised to be there in 5 minutes. The woman looked at Steve, who was watching the match like a meditator. She shook her head and decided to look in on little Tony. The little boy was awake, tossing and turning. Veronica touched his forehead. Well, that's right, fever. It wasn't her baby, and Steve didn't even call her to marry him. So they met, and she started to live with him, but she hadn't moved out of her sister's house yet. But Veronica's heart squeezed as she imagined that the little boy would be left alone with his father, who, frankly speaking, had already forgotten even to feed him. Veronica began to come here the very next day after Grandma Maria had left for the sanatorium. She sincerely sympathized with the old woman's grief and did not want to get in her face. And in general, Veronica thought badly of herself for the fact that barely a man buried his wife. She came to him. But on the other hand, that's life. Veronica explained her position to her sister. "I've known Steve for a long time, since he's been married to Maria. May she rest in peace. Married. So I'm not a slutty, immoral woman, but just in a hurry." "I'm not judging you," replied the sister. "It's just that people will talk. Let them talk." Veronica dismissed it. "What's in it for me? Cold? Hot? I am, already 38 years old. A big girl, I'm sorry. I'll live alone a little longer, and I'll turn into a grandma, so. And by the way, I'm very noble." She splashed her hands. "I'll live with a man who's a single father. A stranger's child, not everyone will accept, but I will, no offense. Oh, Veronica, said her sister. Do as you please, but Steve's a bit shady. So what? Maria married him, all right. All right, enough about dead people at night. And Veronica spit over her left shoulder just in case. Steve, do you mind if I take Tony with me? Well, in my sister's apartment until morning, until dinner? Veronica turned to the man and explained to him the work-family circumstances of the relative. It doesn't make any difference, replied Steve. At least she won't yell. I'm sick of it. And we just have a headache, or maybe a sore throat, or maybe a tummy. Yes, we? Well, nothing. Now you and I will get together. We'll go to visit, right? Soon Steve was alone. He heard the door slam, but he didn't go to close it. He was just lazy and decided that he would go later, but for now he should watch soccer. The phone beeped with an incoming message. Steve threw a lazy glance at it. What else is there? It had been sent by a man Steve had worked with not so long ago, selling miracle cures. And this man wrote what Steve already knew, that their office was exposed by some journalists, that they were threatened with litigation by deceived people who believed that the drug would cure anything, even cancer, or even grow a new hand for a disabled person. Steve had left before all this started. He had been squeezed out by other people who had come into this perishable business. He lazily flipped through a few messages, not understanding why he was being told all this again. But the last lines alerted him. Apparently, someone has been hit hard. The man wrote, I'm only warning you because I borrowed money from you and I couldn't pay you back. And I won't be able to, by the way. I'm sorry. Steve frowned. What could he be warned about? The fact that he would be charged something for selling useless pacifiers for tens of thousands of dollars. He did not care. Everything was clean. And the suckers, mostly old people, they themselves, in Steve's opinion, were guilty of falling for the advertising and did not read the instructions. But then Steve opened the next message and rounded his eyes. You sold this to Grandpa Frank, remember? They are looking for whoever did it. I'd advise you to get away, preferably overseas, and get plastic surgery to make sure they don't find you. That's it. Goodbye. And thanks for the money. You're not far from those suckers yourself. Steve cursed. And indeed, he was an idiot when he gave his last paycheck from the case under the promise of repayment of the debt with a crazy interest, which this man swore to repay, because, allegedly, he knew how to play with stocks. I fell for it myself. In fact, he was as stupid as the pensioners who hoped to cure all their ailments with miracle vitamins. But who was Grandpa Frank? Steve could not remember such a person. In general, he had no need to remember all the old people with whom he worked. But he felt uneasy. Steve shivered and suddenly thought about the other day when he saw a strange black car in front of his driveway. Then, remembering that he hadn't closed the door behind Veronica, he jumped up from the sofa and went into the corridor. The stadium roared as another goal was scored. Steve thought that the sound could be turned down, and he froze in the corridor, because now there was a stranger standing there, and the idea that it was a drunken neighbor mistook the door dropped at once. This man was young, tall, and nightmarishly strong in appearance. Clad in black, he literally radiated menace. Steve? He asked, but it seemed that the question was rhetorically mocking, because he knows exactly whose apartment he got into and who was in front of him. Buy alarm system Baloo and sleep easy. With Baloo, your home is protected from any threat. Shouted an advertisement on TV, and Steve thought that the protection of this particular apartment was at full zero. He left the door open himself. Made it easier for this guy, whoever he was, to accomplish his obviously sinister task. If you're not a complete idiot, you'll sit down, keep your hands where I can see them, and we'll talk, he said and moved forward, moved silently, like a cat. Steve swallowed hard. Shall we go into the kitchen? Said Steve. The stranger nodded. Steve took a step forward, another. This hallway was full of junk that Olivia wouldn't throw away, and among the things that stood out was a floor rack, like the kind that would be more appropriate in a clothing store or a theater dressing room. On it hung Maria's outer garments, which had not been cleaned up in time, as well as her grandmother's scribbled fur coat, which Steve had decided not to give to her, but to sell later. And when Steve found himself near this rack, he suddenly grabbed the bar with both hands, jerked it to the side, and pushed it so that the structure with the things collapsed on the stranger. He did not expect such a maneuver and trivially fell to the floor, buried by the closet. But Steve realized that it would not last long, so he jumped out of the apartment and, jumping over 2 steps, rushed downstairs. Taif, yup. He was blocked by Albert, an old librarian who lived with an old lady wife who was head of the house committee, and 4 dachshunds with a temper and an angry temper that would be good for 40 bull terriers. Steve hesitated as he tried to squeeze past Albert's pack without them biting his limbs. Finally, he jumped out of the driveway. Oh, it's freezing. They promised a frost of 30, but it felt like -100 on bare feet, in just sweatpants and a t-shirt. Steve was glad that he had accidentally left the bunch of keys, including the car keys, in his pocket. He left them because they had a keychain in the form of a funny green frog, which he always clutched in his hand while watching soccer and believed that it would support his favorite team with luck. Somehow he remembered that Maria jokingly called him crazy for this. Steve rushed to this car and, gritting his teeth, shaking his whole body, tried to start the engine. Where to now? He decided that he would have to try to call that guy and find out from him what was going on. But right now, he had to get somewhere safe. And Steve knew where that place was. Olivia woke up abruptly, not even realizing what had caused it. She was dreaming about something. I think it was her daughter. That's right. She dreamed of that distant day more than a year ago when, as it seemed, she had finally divorced her philandering husband. They had fought often then. Steve hadn't even spent the night at home. Olivia tried not to meddle in the soul of the child, but in every possible way supported the nighting mood of her daughter when she decided suddenly that she would not run and look for him in the acquaintances, and instead will go to the holiday, where called a friend. Maria had few friends at all, and this Angelica, a girl from the accounting department, a colleague, did not really like Olivia because she was some kind of broken, frivolous at 35, not married, because she was looking for someone special, a prince, waiting. But that time Olivia was grateful to Angelica that she had invited her daughter to some holiday, a party from the company. It seemed to be a good sign. The old woman hoped that maybe at least under Angelique's influence her daughter would finally realize that Steve really wasn't worthy of her. Olivia lay with her eyes open to the darkness of the barracks. Now that the merciful shackles of deep sleep had fallen away, she was getting very cold again. But what drew her attention was a quiet sound coming from outside. It was the creaking of the door that had been opened. Someone had entered the room. "Who's there?" Olivia asked so quietly that she couldn't hear her own voice. "Who's there?" She repeated the question, and fear pierced her body as much as the cold. "It's me," came a familiar voice. "Steve." The old woman was confused. "What are you?" "Don't make a fuss, old woman," he muttered. "I'm this for a little while. I have here." He didn't have time to finish because the door creaked again, and then Steve shrieked and something heavy fell to the floor. The silence of the night exploded with the sounds of a fight, and apparently Steve was losing, and he was already wheezing. Olivia, herself neither alive nor dead with horror, scrambled around on her strange, cold bed under the heavy blankets, pulled one hand out from under them and reached for the light switch. It was next to the bed. Light flashed under the ceiling. Electricity, unlike heating, came to the barracks properly, and in fact, only thanks to the fact that she could always go to heat boiling water. The old woman was still holding on. The lighting caused a brief confusion among those who fought. And now Grandma Maria could see everything. Steve was lying on the floor, face down, both hands clasped behind his back, and a man was crouching over him like a huge black predator. As he raised his head, he glanced up at the old woman, and recognition flashed in his eyes. And she recognized him. It was the same stranger who had helped her up at the bakery and then treated her and bought her baked goods. The guy swore short and angry, judging by the intonation, but the words sounded unfamiliar, like a foreign word. Olivia rounded her eyes. It was French. It didn't make anything clearer, though. "Help!" Steve squirmed under his opponent. "Shut up!" the black-haired man said, and rose easily in one unified movement. Steve was left lying on the floor, his hands firmly bound with a plastic tie. Somehow Olivia wasn't scared anymore. She just didn't know what was happening. And then, inadvertently, she had another bout of harsh coughing. The old woman was choking, and it seemed to her that her heart was going to fail. She did not immediately realize that the guy in black was near her, that he was leaning over her and saying something. Then she realized that he was asking her what was wrong. He touched her forehead and pulled his hand away, as if he had burned himself on her fever. "How long have you been here?" the strange man asked. Olivia nodded. He frowned. He looked around the room. He looked back at Steve. "You two know each other?" "My brother-in-law." The brunette gritted his teeth so that his cheekbones stood out more sharply and pulled his cell phone out of his jacket pocket. "Cameron, send a car. The old lady's not well." "No, it's not my fault, you idiot. It looks like she has a cold or maybe the flu. I don't know. Right now, she's not feeling well at all." Olivia blinked, continuing to squint at the overly bright light. Her recent savior, meanwhile, had ended the call and was calling again. There had been a change of plans. "No, I found him. It's just, there's something else I need to do." "No, no problem. I'll call you back." "Man, let go." Steve's voice came out. He was floundering on the floor and he managed to sit up. "Who the hell are you? What the hell are you doing?" "I'm..." "Shut up," the brunette said calmly. "I'm going to release you now, understand?" He lifted Steve to his feet and shook him. "I see," he nodded toward Olivia. "You're a very thoughtful son-in-law, and that's to be expected. But you're lucky. I'll set you free. But don't do anything stupid, okay? You've made a mess of things, and you're gonna have to answer for it. I'm just an enforcer. You'll be talking to someone else. Running is not an option. I'll find it." He stopped talking, closed his eyes for a moment and exhaled sharply, then opened his eyes and continued more calmly. "You're playing doctor, but you're lucky. It's in your best interest not to piss me off, okay?" Steve didn't understand, but he nodded just in case, all his contrived dishiness evaporating. He didn't understand anything, but he felt he was in big trouble. The brunette turned Steve's back to him. The folding knife clicked and the ties were cut. "It's okay." The guy raised his hands conciliatorily and walked back to Olivia's bed. He didn't let Steve out of his sight either. "Grandma, what's your name?" "Olivia." "Nice to meet you. I'm Alexander. I called for help." "Don't worry, I'll get you some help." "An ambulance?" Olivia whispered, thinking belatedly that she probably should have done it herself earlier. "Even better," Alexander replied. The next events merged for Olivia into something mixed, unclear, and at the same time fragmented into many episodes, as if she was inside a huge, confused kaleidoscope. She realized that some people had put her on a stretcher and carried her out of the barracks, that it was suddenly warm, that she was being taken in a car. Then other people were bustling around. They were doctors. She felt softness, cleanliness of the bed where she was, and it was warm again. They were doing something with her. And then finally came sleep, deep, calm, as never before. When Olivia woke up, the sun was shining outside the window. It was one of those winter days when spring seems to come tomorrow. The old woman looked around at her surroundings. It was a hospital room, and at the same time it was very cozy. "Good morning." A young, pretty nurse entered the room. "How are you feeling, Olivia?" "The doctor will come soon and tell you everything in detail. But I can tell you something too, you'll be fine soon. My name is Alice. You need to eat now. What would you like for breakfast? Here is the menu." A large laminated sheet appeared in the nurse's hands. "Unfortunately, we didn't find your glasses among your things," she said embarrassedly. "If you allow me, I'll read what we have." I, Olivia said at a loss. Grandmother didn't understand a thing. What kind of a wonderful hospital was she in, where the room was only one bed? Everything was so beautiful, pictures on the walls, and the food was a la carte. The nurse managed to clarify the situation. She said that it was a private clinic, White Hyacinth, and that Olivia's stay there was fully paid for. By whom? Olivia asked, shocked, although she thought she already knew the answer. Mr. Barsov. Alexander Barsov took care of everything, Alice answered. What about breakfast, Olivia? Your doctor will scold me if you don't eat anything before his visit. It was strange and embarrassing to be in such a rich position, but Olivia realized that she was really hungry. Christopher came along with the way she was feeling better. The old lady listened to the nurse, read the menu, and said she would like to have porridge with wild berries, a protein omelet with chicken, and a cup of tea. Everything was served about 10 minutes later on a tray and in beautiful dishes. Alice asked Olivia if she was allergic to roses. She answered that she wasn't, and she was just shocked when the tray was filled with a small vase with a real pink candy rose. Olivia's doctor was an old-school man. He looked about 60, but he was sturdy and quick. He introduced himself as Cameron and said that it was necessary, of course, to undergo examinations, but the initial prognosis was the most favorable, and in a couple or 3 weeks of treatment, Olivia would be healthy. Toward evening, Alice looked in on Olivia and asked if she would accept a visitor. She said yes, and Alexander entered the room. How many questions Olivia's grandmother had about what had happened to her son-in-law, how he had ended up in her barracks, and why were they fighting. But she was even more concerned about the reasons for Alexander's extraordinary act of rescuing her again. "After all, I'm a complete stranger to you." The old woman waved her hands. "I just don't understand. Do you believe in fate?" Alexander asked. "I do. The day I met you, I considered it a good sign that I'd met someone I could help. And the second time, let's say it's a sign again, but in a different way." He looked at Olivia carefully. She even became a little uncomfortable. It seemed that this young man was looking into her very soul. "Do you know what your son-in-law was doing? What kind of business he was in?" Olivia nodded. "He said he sold vitamins. Some foreign firm had invented a cure for all diseases. Only I thought," Olivia added carefully, "that he was lying. He used to say it with a laugh for some reason, and rarely. He started drinking a lot. He told his wife, my Marie, and I was there. Then when he sobered up, he swore a lot, saying it was none of our business, that he's a man, a provider, and he decides everything himself. You were right not to believe him. There was nothing in these supposedly miracle drugs. You know," Alexander continued thoughtfully, "they are sometimes called harmless pacifiers, but it's not true. Sometimes people start taking them and refuse the real treatment. The consequences can be the most deplorable." "Did someone die?" Olivia asked cautiously. "A good man." Alexander looked at her carefully, as if reading the old woman's reaction, and then he told her how it was. Grandpa Frank lived in a small village on a picturesque coast. He was a sturdy old man. In his 77 years, he still continued to go to the forest, to hunt, and just, as he said, to rest his soul from the big world, which even reached the village. Grandpa Frank was considered by many to be a hermit, but it was not so at all. He was friends with a family that had long ago moved to the city, and from this family, a boy, Christopher, was often sent to him for the summer. In fact, Christopher's childhood was spent there, in the village, in the company of an old man to whom he became very attached. Time passed, Christopher. This man became a successful businessman, a millionaire, but continued to maintain good, in fact, kinship relations with Frank, who replaced his own grandfathers. They passed away when Christopher was still a baby. Christopher offered Frank to move to the city. After all, his age was already respectable, but he refused and said that his nature and native land kept him and he would not go anywhere. And then the old man fell ill. Christopher arranged everything to take him for examination, and the doctors made a serious diagnosis. Christopher's pancreas was out of order. Naturally, they prescribed treatment. The old man fought back, saying that he didn't need any chemistry. He used herbs like in the old days. It took Christopher a lot of effort to change his mind. Grandpa Frank went back to the village and began to live as before and heal. But then disaster struck. A man came to the village. He began to go door to door and introduce himself to the locals, mostly pensioners, as a representative of a certain pharmaceutical company. He spoke a lot of clever words, shook papers in front of old people's faces, which allegedly told about successful laboratory studies and clinical trials, showed certificates. He assured that the miracle pills would cure all diseases and that it was a natural remedy based on forgotten recipes of medieval healers, enhanced by innovative scientific developments, that it worked directly on human genes, and said many other things. The pills cost a lot of money, $10,000 per pack, and the entire course needed 30 packs. But a discount was provided, and only allegedly, because the buyers, pensioners, they are entitled to benefits. Many, and mostly those who lived alone, agreed. They took out loans, they withdrew their savings, they gave the last of their money. Grandpa Frank gave in too, but he didn't just start taking those pacifiers. He stopped taking the medications prescribed by doctors and decided that thanks to the miracle remedy, he no longer needed to diet. The old man decided that he would not say anything to Christopher, whom he considered as a grandson, his own person. He wanted to please him, to show him off when he recovered. Look, this is how I was cured without your chemistry. But soon his condition deteriorated sharply. He started his disease, and he could not be saved. Christopher found out the details of who had pushed Frank to this decision and took matters into his own hands. He had enough power to organize with the help of his legal team to investigate these miracle drug dealers and bring them to light. Christopher would make sure they never hurt anyone again, but he was much more interested in one particular person. He wanted to find the person who had convinced Grandpa Frank to make that fateful decision. Steve was that man? Alexander's story shook Olivia to the core. She believed him. She now knew what Steve was really like, and grieved that she had not realized his evil, vicious essence before, that she had not understood and done nothing, that she had allowed her daughter to marry this monster and have a child by him. Yes, Alexander answered. Can I ask you something? Olivia felt that she was ready to hear any answer. Who are you? And what do you want to do? I'm Christopher's brother, a cousin. I represent his interests abroad, say. And now he's called me in to help him with this case. So that's where the accent comes from. Olivia shook her head. It seemed to me that you began to forget your native language. I'd gotten used to using it. I spent the last few years in France, and I taught French when I was young. Really? So that's where your charm comes from. I could tell you were a complicated person, he smiled, and Olivia smiled back. But then Alexander became serious again. Christopher wanted to punish whoever had done this to Frank. Punish, not in the way that was legally possible for that man. You know, I was hesitant to talk to you about this at first. And the doctor. Alexander paused for a moment. Your doctor wouldn't approve of it, because it's stressful. But I think you should know. Christopher left the nuances up to me, but basically, Steve should have his arms, legs, and spine broken. Silence hung in the chamber. Olivia looked at Alexander and tried to understand. What kind of man is he? Was he really capable of doing this? She knew he could be kind, generous, but it also seemed to her that in certain circumstances, he was capable of a lot. But now I have my doubts. I mean, he's your son-in-law. That wouldn't be a problem. Theoretically, given what he did to you. You didn't end up in the barracks by yourself, did you? But he is the father of your grandson, and therefore you have a blood bond. And that's what I regret more than anything, Olivia said honestly. And I'll be honest too, I know that Steve did a lot of bad things. But if something happens to him, my grandson, Tony will end up in an orphanage. I'm too old and sick to be trusted with custody of him. Olivia started to sit up on the bed. Alexander walked over to her and handed her the remote control. This button adjusts the position of the top of the bed. If you press it, it will rise smoothly. Olivia gently pressed the button, and indeed part of the bed rose, thus helping her to sit up. Could you hand me my bag, please? It was a small old purse in which Olivia kept the most necessary things: documents, some medicines, glasses, and some photo cards. Here, my grandson. She showed Alexander the photo. He is here in the arms of my daughter, Maria. Alexander looked at the photo very carefully. Your daughter was a real beauty. And what age is the boy? Olivia answered exactly. I understand that your brother is that he hates the one who did such a thing. But how can you? It's all so horrible. Olivia felt the tears start to flow from her eyes again. Tony, who's my grandson with? She remembered something else important. Who did he stay with yesterday when you arrived? You left the baby alone. After all, you think worse of me than I am. Alexander replied jokingly, but there was not a shadow of mirth in his gaze. I entered the apartment after I learned that Vera, that is, your brother-in-law's roommate, had gone to her own apartment and taken the baby with her. She got a call from her sister and she came down to watch the kids while she was at work. And if it makes you feel any better, I wasn't going to do anything to Steve right there. Christopher wanted me to bring him to him so they could talk in person, and then I screwed up. Your son-in-law, for a while, let's say, threw me off balance and ran. I chased him, and you know the rest." "Not everything," Olivia replied. "What happened after How was I brought here?" "I accompanied you in my car," Alexander answered. "Steve was with me. He was a little more savvy than I thought he would be. I explained to him briefly what was going on and told him that there was a chance of a relatively happy ending for him, but only if he didn't do anything stupid. He walked out of here on his own 2 feet. He's back home. He'll be there and he won't run. He doesn't want his situation any worse than it is now. And you, Olivia, he's the reason you're in the barracks, isn't he?" "I am. If it makes you feel better, you can tell me how it happened." "I don't know." Olivia shook her head. "It's just life. It's just that he deceived me." And the old woman told how Steve had taken her apartment and what had happened next. "That man definitely deserves to be punished," Alexander said thoughtfully. "And at the same time, he must not be touched." "What should we do?" "I will definitely think about it. And as for your property, that of course can and should be corrected." "But how?" Olivia marveled. "I've already signed everything. I'll take care of the problem and I'll let you know." "Now I have to go," Alexander said, getting up. "Get well, Olivia. Your grandson needs you." Olivia felt exhausted by this conversation. She used the remote control to return the bed to its previous position and decided to take a nap. "Olivia, are you asleep?" A nurse called her quietly as she entered the room. "You have a visitor." "I told him that in your condition, it's not good to have many visitors, but he insists." "Who?" Olivia had no idea of who else might be here. "Steve, he said, your son-in-law." "All right, let him come in," she mumbled, not sure what he wanted from her. Steve knew exactly what he wanted. Even though the events of the previous evening had been a shock to him, he quickly realized that the man who had come for him for his past deeds was somehow special to the old woman. He'd taken her to a paid clinic. Steve had an idea how much it would cost. He had no idea what these two might have in common, but he knew what he had to do. When he got to the room, he immediately started talking about how remorseful he was for mistreating Olivia, about how he realized that they were family. He said that he hadn't done anything wrong. He had nothing to do with it, and he didn't understand why he was being attacked now. And then he suddenly realized that Olivia didn't believe a word he said. "Go away," she said simply. "It's unfortunate that my daughter married you. It hurts me. What do you want?" "For me to protect you in front of him? You're a coward, Steve. You always have been. You just used my daughter, our family. Do you have a heart? It's a good thing your son's too young to see what his daddy's like. Your daughter jumped on me. Who else wanted her? Walking around like a gray mouse, just as crazy as her mama." Steve raised his voice, and he wasn't just talking, he was drooling. "Son? What son is he to me? She fattened him up, she was one. And he called his dead wife a filthy, filthy word. How can you say that to me?" Olivia shrieked. Her hand fumbled on the wall. The nurse had said there was a button to call her somewhere, and the old woman wanted her son-in-law to leave. "You really don't like it, do you?" Steve grinned. "I didn't have anything going on with your daughter at the time. I didn't. Do you understand, old girl? There's no way I can be the father of this kid. The timing doesn't add up. Maria was a whore. I guess she wanted to pick up someone better, but she couldn't. And yes, it was convenient for me to live like that, very convenient. 2 fools got caught, and they hung their ears. You made me sick. Well, nothing. At least I got an apartment." Steve chuckled evilly. "What do you think you're doing?" Attracted by the noise on the threshold of the room appeared Alice. "Shut up, guards," shouted the girl in the corridor, and in a minute she was joined by a sturdy type. "Olivia, your visitor to escort to the exit?" Alice asked, squinting unkindly. "Yes, I want him to leave," Olivia answered quietly and cried. The guards, almost by the scruff of the neck, escorted her son-in-law to the exit of the clinic. Alice fussed around the patient and apologized for not preventing the scandal earlier. The old woman could only think about what Steve had said. Was he lying? Did he want to hit her hard? Or was it true? Because then, at that time, when Maria said that she was pregnant, they really did not get along with Steve, and a little more would be a divorce. But then who could be the father of the child? And why hadn't Maria, her kind, pure, gentle girl, said anything? Olivia did not know that at the moment of the conversation in the corridor was and heard everything Alexander. He was a little late in the clinic to talk to the attending doctor of the grandmother. And then when he heard everything Steve had said, he left the clinic in a hurry. He had some things to clear up. Veronica basically wanted to have children someday, but she had always thought that the children would be hers, her own. And now she had to take care of Steve's son, as if her sister's brood wasn't enough. Good afternoon. Are you out for a walk? A tall man approached Veronica. She remembered his name. Alexander. He'd come here the other day to see Steve. What their business was, it wasn't clear at all. Steve only said that he knew him. His voice trembled strangely. We're taking a walk. Veronica smiled. We breathe fresh air, it's good for the baby. Naturally, Alexander sat down in front of the boy. Tony had recently learned to walk, but he did it very diligently. The little boy smiled happily and twirled his head. He was amused by the fluffy snowfall. Are you his fiancé? Alexander asked. Fiancé? Well, I'm not. No, we haven't talked about it yet. Veronica giggled coquettishly. Why does he hesitate? Such a kind woman, taking care of the son. Listening to these sweet speeches, Veronica was distracted. Hey kid, your hat is off on your forehead. Alexander gently reached out to fix the hat. Let me help you. That's it, it's good again. He stood up, smiled at Veronica again. Have a good walk. Say hello to Steve for me. Tell him that things will be clearer for him soon. He knows what I'm talking about. Veronica gave Alexander a thoughtful look inside. She really liked this mysterious acquaintance of Steve's. And why didn't she get such a man? Handsome, it is obvious that strong, and also he has a car, obviously expensive. He's not accepting anyone. A secretary in the reception of one of the most famous businessmen of the city and region. Woke up and rushed in front of a tall, black-haired man whose face instantly caused associations with some predatory animal. I'm always allowed, said the stranger, who unceremoniously intended to open the door to the office of the head of the corporation. Bypassing the obligatory stage for all visitors, it was necessary to tell the secretary who he was, and she looked, whether it was appointed by appointment, clarified what the issue was, could ask the chief if he was free. But the girl protested. New girl? He interrupted. The secretary nodded. I like it. Before, only blondes sat here, and you're a redhead? It's refreshing. He winked and entered the office, leaving her confused and embarrassed. Oh, it's you. A man in his 40s in a business suit sitting at the desk glanced at the newcomer. How's our business going? There is news, said Alexander. But before we clear up one question, a party a little over a year ago on a yacht. Models, girls from the firm with which you signed that lucrative contract. It was fun, right? What are you talking about? Christopher frowned and even pushed back the folder with documents he was looking through earlier. Did you have a good time? Alexander continued. So good that you forgot about the consequences, right? And this girl here. Alexander handed his brother a smartphone with a photo. Do you remember her? Christopher frowned, looking at the picture. It had been taken at the party. He was with two girls, the senior accountant, Angelica, from the partner firm. It was a small firm, and such an alliance opened up some great prospects for her. Christopher remembered the other girl's name was Maria. Angelica introduced her as her friend, and then in a confidential whisper told him that Maria was offended by her husband and that she had taken her friend out to get away at last because she was a recluse. The party ended well past midnight. Christopher grimaced. He'd let himself go too far. He behaved like some uncouth boy. He had danced with this Maria and secluded himself with her in the cabin. It had been a flash, some kind of obsession between them. He remembered that when the heat of passion wore off, the girl burst into tears. She began to say that she was so bad she didn't know what had come over her and that she had cheated on her husband. He felt uncomfortable and tried to comfort her. He said it was nothing. They were adults and didn't have to tell her husband about it, especially if he was treating her so badly. Then Angelica picked Maria up and said she would take her home. She didn't seem to realize what had happened between them. Christopher twirled the pen nervously in his fingers. When Alex had arrived, they talked a little about everything, about life, and he'd mentioned this episode. He'd said that he usually had constant mistresses, and then suddenly she'd been bewitched. Why had he said that? No reason. My brother and I never kept secrets from each other. We shared everything, but now Christopher didn't understand what was going on. I'll explain it to you. Alexander understood his brother's confused look, but I have to start from afar. It all started when I started looking for that bastard who killed Frank. I came upon a man who was connected with all this and wanted to pay a personal visit to move on. I went to the suburbs for coffee and met this old lady. An old lady? What does that have to do with anything? Christopher almost jumped. Listen, brother. Listen carefully and don't interrupt, Alexander said, putting his palm on his relative's shoulder. Olivia had been in the hospital for 2 weeks, and that time seemed like a vacation to her. As soon as she felt better, she went out for walks, accompanied by Alice. She could walk in the small courtyard on the territory of the clinic, where fluffy blue spruces grew, or in the miniature but lush winter garden, where there was even a pond with red golden carp. His cough was gone. His heart was working better. Steve never showed up again, but Alexander came almost every day, and Grandma Maria was very happy about it. She was a little uncomfortable to use his kindness, but she did not refuse gifts. He gave her cozy, comfortable clothes to the hospital and then simply said that everything that was needed could be asked from Alice. She would order and he would pay for it later. Olivia asked to take one important thing from the barracks, a photo of her grandfather, Tony. That, too, was fulfilled. Olivia, Alice looked into the room. There are visitors here to see you. Alexander and Alice looked worried. They'd just been to the head doctor's office, Anne. They were, and I told you that excessive stress is bad for the patient. But I see you can't stop, said the head doctor who entered the room. Olivia, I need to be present for this conversation. Olivia, what's wrong? The old woman was confused and then aghast because 3 more people appeared in the room. Alexander, who had a boy in his arms. Tony, the old woman stretched out her hands to her grandson, and Alexander gently lowered, put the child on the edge of the bed. He himself pushed the chair and sat closer, ensuring the baby, so that he did not fall off. But how? What? The questions crowded into Olivia's chest, tears welling up in her eyes. How she missed her grandson. Hello, Olivia, Christopher said. He didn't look like a formidable, solid businessman now. He was, of course, wearing an expensive tailored suit, but he looked like a confused, worried man who was about to have a very difficult conversation. It was mostly Alexander who spoke. He spoke without hurry and interrupted several times when the chief physician intervened. He was very interested in whether the patient was feeling well. He came up to her and checked her pulse. Sometimes he grumbled that nerves should be taken care of at such an age after such an illness, and then they try, treat, and then that's what happens. Alexander talked about everything. Olivia listened and could not believe it, and at the same time she realized it was true. Her daughter, her Maria, had spent a random night with a man. She was afraid to confide in her mother, and even more so to hide it from her husband. Alexander emphasized that this was not just an assumption made because of a conversation he had overheard. It turned out that he had approached Veronica, who was walking with the baby, for a reason. He had managed to discreetly and carefully obtain a few hairs from Tony's head, and thus it was possible to conduct a genetic paternity test, which showed that Tony was Christopher's own son. But what does that make? Olivia whispered. So Steve is a stranger to you. He's a stranger to you. Alexander finished for her. He's not a relative. The baby has a real father. I'm not married, Christopher said, and I never have been. I don't have children. I'm sure of it. I don't have kids except Tony, and I want to be a real father to him. You want? Grandma hugged the boy tighter, hugging him. Will you take my grandson away from me? No, I won't give him to you. How can you do that? My little blood. I told you so. The head doctor squinted. Olivia, please calm down. You don't have to be afraid of anything. Christopher continued hurriedly. I have no intention of separating you. But the child, of course, must have all the appropriate conditions. You know what I mean. Olivia, I want to suggest something. You can live next door to me, together with your grandson. I have a big house and there's plenty of room for everyone. The boy needs to be with his real family, and that's me and you. Olivia cried. Although they were not tears of grief, the head doctor insisted that she had had enough visits for the day. Olivia fell asleep easily that night and had peaceful dreams because she knew that there was nothing between her and Steve now. More importantly, she knew that her Maria's son Tony was sleeping somewhere else tonight. It turned out that Alexander and Christopher had taken the boy as soon as the results of the genetic testing were known. Steve gave them the child without a peep. He was most afraid for himself and was ready to do anything if it could whiten him in the eyes of two powerful enemies. In general, the head doctor was against stress for patients very much. But Olivia said that she was ready to receive visitors even today on a new day. Alexander brought a lawyer who explained to the grandmother in clear language that it was possible to cancel her gift. The best specialist would take care of it. True, it was impossible to do anything about the fact that Steve received a share in the apartment after the death of his wife. Olivia rejoiced that she would soon be discharged from Christopher's house, and not just any house, but a mansion in the suburbs. Every day came photos and video messages about how Tony was doing. It turned out he was already surrounded by Nanny's two lovely women in light purple uniforms, playing with the boy, showing him the room he'd been assigned as a nursery, and finally, the day had come. Olivia had to go to the new place. She realized that now a whole new life would begin for her. But there was something else she wanted to understand first. So what's going to happen to Steve? She asked Alexander, who had come to pick her up. You know, he's nothing to me now. Olivia realized that Steve was a terrible person. He had done a lot of bad things. But at the same time, she even felt a little sorry for him. She realized that Alexander's threats were not empty words. She realized that people like Alexander and his brother were capable of many things. I wanted to talk about it, the man said. You know, as soon as I found Steve, I started collecting information about him. Do you know that he's sick? Yes, Olivia nodded. He said he had a lot of headaches. He said it was because of the women's scandals. That's how it is, Alexander laughed. For a long time, the doctors thought it was a blood pressure problem. But the day before yesterday, I got the information that Steve has brain cancer. Olivia gasped. An extremely aggressive form and stage. Anyway, there's no help for it. The doctors say he only has 3 or 4 months left. And when I broke the news to my brother, he doesn't believe in fate the way I do, but he said it's a just retribution. Olivia didn't know what to say. She knew that Alexander was right about something, and yet it was too scary. So you won't touch him? She asked only quietly. Alexander shook his head. No, my brother doesn't want me to get my hands dirty, and frankly, I have my own business to attend to. I didn't know Grandpa Frank, unfortunately. He was a good man, and he will be avenged, albeit by fate. I'm leaving tomorrow, Alexander added. How? Where? Olivia was confused. She did not doubt that Christopher was not a bad or even a good man, because that was what her brother said about him. But still, it was Alexander who had come to her aid that frosty day. It was thanks to her meeting with him that she survived, and it was thanks to him that her grandson found a real father. To Mexico, the young man replied. I've always wanted to go there. My brother and I are a little different. He likes business, but it's too boring for me. If he has difficulties, I'll help him, of course. I've done it many times, but I have my own way. Olivia sighed. How sad it is when people who suddenly appeared in your life, who brought light into it, who brought you back to something you never dreamed of, suddenly leave. One would have thought that Alexander would come to visit his brother and nephew someday. But Olivia realized it might not happen. He might just settle there forever. Who knows? And maybe he would come, but she was already very old. Grandma Maria thought about all this while the car was driving through the city. And that woman, the neighbor who lived with Steve, she asked. Vera? Alexander said. She left him. He was alone. And soon, your apartment will belong to you. And Tony again. Olivia, don't be sad. He touched her shoulder gently and smiled. We're here. You're home. The car drove through the gate into the mansion grounds. Snow covered everything now, and the branches of the trees and shrubs were like silver in hoarfrost. But Olivia could imagine how beautiful it was here in spring, summer, and fall. She got out of the car, leaning on the hand offered to her. They walked to the house, went up to the wide porch, Two marble lions with curly manes sat on either side of it. "He ate well," said the nanny about his ward. "It's nice to meet you. My name is Kadia. Tony is a very nice young man." He kept asking, "Where is Baba?" "I'm here, grandson," said the old woman and stroked the child's head. His hair was as blonde as his mother's. "Christopher wants to talk to you some more," said Alexander quietly. "He feels guilty for what happened, for treating your daughter like a one-night stand. That's life," Olivia sighed. "I don't know how things would have turned out, but she loved Steve so much. She believed he was her destiny." She turned to the baby. "Look, Tony, it's your uncle." "Uncle," repeated the boy with a very focused look and reached out and touched Alexander's hand. He was interested in his ring. He grinned at him. "Grow up soon. I'll give it to you, nephew, when you turn 16. They say it brings good luck."